You're a stain on our name, Serena. Margaret Caldwell's voice sliced through the crowded ballroom, her diamond necklace flashing like a guillotine. Serena Duval stood frozen, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles ached. The billionaire matriarch loomed, her pale face twisted with contempt. A black girl from Brooklyn thinks she can claim the Caldwell legacy? The room, packed with New York's elite, erupted in cruel chuckles. Serena's jaw tightened, her pulse hammering. Margaret stepped closer, her heels stabbing the marble floor. You were Ethan's mistake, nothing more. Serena opened her mouth, but Margaret cut her off. Don't speak. You don't belong here. The words landed like a whip, each syllable dripping with venom. Ethan, her husband, stood steps away, his eyes glued to the floor. His silence burned worse than the insults. Guests whispered, their smirks sharp as knives. Gold digger, one hissed. Charity case, another sneered. Serena's throat constricted, but her spine stayed rigid. She wouldn't crumble. Not here. Margaret leaned in, her breath cold. Leave, or I'll make sure you're nothing. The crowd parted as Margaret gestured to security. Serena's fingers brushed the pearl necklace Ethan gave her, now a weight around her neck. Cameras flashed, capturing her every flinch. Go back to where you came from, a guest muttered. The room spun, but Serena locked eyes with Margaret, her gaze a silent vow. She took a step back, not in defeat, but in defiance. This wasn't the end. It was the spark of a fire they'd soon regret igniting. What would Serena do with that fire? The answer waited in the shadows. Serena Duval's heels struck the marble floor, each step a defiance against the venom still ringing in her ears. Margaret's words, "You don't belong here," clawed at her chest, but her jaw clenched tight, refusing tears. The crowd's smirks burned her skin, their whispers like shards of glass. She felt Ethan's silence behind her, a betrayal heavier than the pearl necklace choking her throat. Security flanked her, their hands hovering, but Serena's gaze stayed locked on the exit, her spine a steel rod. She wouldn't break, not for them. A guest sneered, "Back to the slums, darling?" Serena stopped dead. Her pulse roared, but her voice was ice. You'll choke on those words one day. The room hushed, their smug faces faltering. Margaret's laugh cut through, sharp and cruel. Bold for a nobody, she spat. Serena turned, her eyes blazing into Margaret's. Nobody, she said low and lethal. Watch me become your reckoning. The matriarch's smirk twitched, a crack in her armor. Serena held her stare, letting the promise sink deep. She pushed through the double doors, cameras flashing like gunfire. Her fingers gripped the pearl necklace, Ethan's gift, now a symbol of her scars. Serena, wait! Ethan's voice cracked behind her, desperate, but she didn't turn. His cowardice had sealed their fate. Outside, the city's pulse thrummed, matching her own. Her fists tightened, nails biting her palms. They thought they'd crushed her, left her with nothing. But nothing was fuel. She'd build an empire from their ashes, make them beg for mercy they'd never shown her. Serena's lips curled, not a smile, but a vow etched in fire. Their laughter would turn to fear. She'd see to it. Ethan Caldwell's fingers trembled as he clutched a crumpled newspaper in the dim light of his office. Serena's words, "Watch me become your reckoning," echoed like a blade in his skull. He'd stood silent while his mother, Margaret, tore her apart, and now her prophecy gnawed at him. The headline stared back. Caldwell Properties faces financial strain. Below it, an old article by Serena, penned before their marriage, dissected their company's reckless land deals with surgical precision. She'd warned of cracks in their empire, cracks now splitting wide open. His stomach churned. Had they underestimated her? Margaret burst in, her pearls clinking like chains. "Stop moping, Ethan," she snapped, her voice a whip. He thrust the article at her. She was right, Mother. Serena saw this coming. Margaret's eyes narrowed, her lips a thin slash. She's nothing, a nobody. But her fingers twitched as she snatched the paper, scanning it. Her face paled, just for a second, before she tossed it aside. Coincidence, she hissed. Ethan's jaw tightened. Or brilliance. Margaret's glare could have cracked stone, but he didn't back down. Her certainty wavered, a hairline fracture in her iron facade. Ethan's phone buzzed, shattering the tension. An email from an unknown sender. Your stock is bleeding. Someone's buying. Watch your back. His pulse spiked. Margaret grabbed the phone, her nails digging into her palm. Who sent this? She demanded. Ethan shook his head, but his mind raced to Serena. Could she be the shadow behind this? Margaret's voice dropped, cold as ice. Find out, or we lose everything. Ethan nodded, his throat dry. Serena's fire was no longer just a memory. It was a threat they couldn't ignore. Something was coming, and it wore her name. Serena was never a nobody. Ethan Caldwell's voice cracked, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk. His mother, Margaret, flinched, her pearls clinking like a warning. Enough, Ethan, she barked, her eyes blazing. She's gone. Let her rot. But Ethan's chest burned, Serena's words. Watch me become your reckoning, carving into his soul. That newspaper article, her razor-sharp analysis of their crumbling empire, haunted him. She'd seen their downfall coming, and he'd let Margaret crush her. Guilt clawed his insides, sharp as broken glass. He shoved past Margaret, her protests slicing the air. I'm finding her! Ethan stormed into New York's underbelly, his tailored suit out of place in Brooklyn's gritty streets. Serena's old apartment was empty, the landlord shrugging. She left years ago. Climbed up, I hear. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fingers clutching the article's crumpled edge. He tracked down her old editor, Clara, at a dive bar. Serena's a ghost now, Clara said, her eyes narrowing. Started some finance gig. Smarter than all of you. Ethan's pulse spiked. Finance? Serena? Clara slid him a business card, Duval Ventures, no address. Good luck, she sneered. You don't deserve her. At Caldwell Properties, Margaret raged. You're chasing a shadow, she snapped, intercepting Ethan's call to a private investigator. Her nails dug into her palms, drawing blood. She's nothing. But Ethan's eyes burned. She's everything we're not. He dug deeper, finding a news clip. Serena at a charity event, poised, commanding, surrounded by investors. His throat tightened. She'd rebuilt herself. A file on his desk caught his eye. A leaked board memo about a silent buyer, snapping up Caldwell shares. Initials. SD. His heart stopped. Was this her? Margaret's voice hissed. Stop this or you'll ruin us. Ethan ignored her, his fingers trembling as he dialed the investigator. Find Serena Duval, now. Each lead pulled him closer to a truth he wasn't ready for. Serena wasn't hiding, she was hunting, and her shadow was growing larger. Serena Duval's fingers danced across her laptop, her eyes blazing with focus. Keep pushing, she snapped, her voice a blade cutting through the hum of her Brooklyn office. Her team, young, diverse, hungry, nodded, their screens glowing with stock charts. Duval Ventures wasn't just a startup, it was a war room. Serena's jaw clenched as she reviewed a report. 45% of Caldwell Properties shares secured through shell companies. Her pulse thrummed, each percentage point a step toward crushing the Caldwells. The pearl necklace, Ethan's cursed gift, lay on her desk, a reminder of their betrayal. She wouldn't wear it, not yet. Ms. Duval! A young analyst, Kesha, burst in, her hands shaking. They denied my sister's loan again. Same bank, same excuse. Serena's gaze softened, but her voice stayed steel. Call them. Tell them Duval Ventures backs her. They'll fold. Kesha's eyes widened, gratitude flashing. Serena turned back to her screen, her fingers tightening. She'd built this firm to lift up those the Caldwells crushed. People like Kesha's sister, like her younger self. Every deal she closed was a brick in her empire, a dagger aimed at Margaret's heart. Her phone buzzed, a news alert. Caldwell Properties stock dips again. Serena's lips curled, sharp as a blade. She'd orchestrated the dip, leaking their bad deals to investors. Her team didn't know the full plan, but they trusted her fire. We're almost there, she told them, her voice low, lethal. No mercy for those who showed none. Kesha hesitated. You're scaring them, Miss Duval. Serena's eyes locked on hers. Good. Fear means they're watching. She stood pacing, her heels clicking like gunfire. The Caldwells thought they'd buried her, but she was clawing through their foundation. Soon they'd see her shadow wasn't just rising, it was swallowing them whole. "You betrayed me, Ethan." Serena Duvall's voice sliced through the dim Brooklyn cafe, her eyes blazing like twin flames. Ethan Caldwell stood across from her, his hands trembling, tie askew. Her words from that night, "Watch me become your reckoning," still seared his conscience. He'd tracked her here, past her empire's walls, chasing a ghost who'd outgrown him. Serena's fingers gripped the table, knuckles whitening. The pearl necklace sat in her purse, untouched, a relic of his broken vows. "I'm sorry," Ethan choked out, his voice raw. "I failed you." Serena's laugh was a shard of ice. "Sorry doesn't undo your silence." She leaned forward, her gaze pinning him like a blade. "You let Margaret call me nothing. You stood there." Ethan flinched, his shoulders sagging. "I was weak," he admitted, voice cracking. "But I see you now, Serena. Duvall Ventures. Your name's everywhere." Her jaw tightened, rage flickering. "You don't get to admire me now," she snapped. "You want forgiveness? Earn it." Ethan's eyes widened, pleading. "How?" Serena's voice dropped, lethal. "Give me the truth about Caldwell Properties. Everything." He hesitated, then slid a USB drive across the table. "Financial record," he said low. "Their deals, their debts." Serena's fingers closed around it, her pulse hammering. She plugged it into her laptop, her team's warnings echoing. Fear means they're watching. A file loaded. Ledgers, shady contracts. Then a hidden email chain caught her eye. "Margaret to Raymond 2012, it read. "Bury the Brooklyn land deal. No one can know." Her breath caught. A scandal. Land stolen from a black community. Families displaced for profit. Ethan's face paled. "I didn't know," he whispered. Serena's eyes burned. "You'll help me expose this, or you're nothing to me." He nodded, broken. She stood, clutching the USB. The Caldwell secrets were hers now, and their empire would bleed for it. "You're digging your own grave, Serena." Raymond Caldwell's voice snarled across the boardroom, his fist slamming the polished table. Serena's name burned his tongue, a reminder of the black ex-wife they'd buried years ago. As COO of Caldwell Properties, Raymond 50, with a predator's smirk and eyes like cold steel, stood towering over the executives. His tailored suit couldn't hide the venom pulsing through him. Serena's shadow, Duvall Ventures, was swallowing their stock, now at 45%. Her reckoning, promised in that cursed gala, was no longer a whisper. It was a blade at their throat. Margaret, seated at the table's head, gripped her pen, her knuckles white. "She's a pest," she hissed, but Raymond cut her off. "She's a threat." His glare swept the room, silencing nervous murmurs. "This nobody thinks she can steal our legacy?" His laugh was sharp, jagged. He'd found her name in a shareholder report, SD, the silent buyer. His fingers twitched, itching to crush her. "She's black, broke, and out of her league," he spat, his words slicing like razors. The executives flinched, but none dared speak. Raymond leaned forward, his voice dropping to a growl. "I've got dirt on her. Old articles, rumors, enough to bury her again." He tossed a file onto the table, papers spilling like blood. Inside, a forged document tied Serena to a fake fraud scandal. "Spread it," he ordered. "Ruin her." Margaret's eyes gleamed, but her jaw tightened. "What if she's deeper in?" she muttered. Raymond's smirk widened. "Then we play dirtier." He'd known about the Brooklyn land deal, the families displaced, the bribes. If Serena was sniffing around, he'd make sure she choked on it. His phone buzzed, a cryptic text. "She's closer than you think." Raymond's pulse spiked. Serena wasn't just coming, she was already here. "Raymond's playing dirty, Serena," Layla's voice hissed, her fingers flying across her laptop in Duvall Ventures' cramped back room. Serena Duvall's jaw clenched, her pulse hammering as she stared at the USB drive Ethan had handed her, its secrets burning her palm. The email from 2012, "Bury the Brooklyn land deal," was a live wire, sparking fury. She'd seen the forged fraud allegations Raymond leaked online, smearing her name. Her fists tightened, nails biting skin. "He thinks he can bury me again?" she growled, her voice ablade. "Not this time." Layla's screen flashed with hacked data, bank transfers, city permits, names tied to Caldwell properties. "They paid off officials," Layla said, her eyes wide. "Displaced 50 families for that high-rise." Serena's chest burned, memories of her own Brooklyn roots flooding back. Her mother's eviction, her community's scars. She slammed her hand on the desk. "Get me proof." Layla nodded, diving deeper into encrypted files. Serena paced, her heels clicking like a countdown. The pearl necklace, Ethan's old gift, sat untouched in her purse, a reminder of the Caldwell's betrayal. She'd turned their lies into her weapon. They tracked down Marcus Tate, a retired city planner, in a rundown diner. His hands shook, clutching a coffee mug. "I warned them," he rasped. "Caldwell's bribes ruined lives." Serena leaned in, her gaze piercing. "Names. Dates. Now." Marcus hesitated, then slid a tattered notebook across. "Check 2012. Councilman Reed. He took the money." Serena's pulse surged. She had a lead. Layla cross-checked the notebook with her data, finding a paper trail. Reed's signature on fraudulent permits. "Got him?" Layla whispered. Serena's lips curled, sharp. "Not enough. We need the source." Back at the office, Raymond's smear campaign hit harder. News outlets ran headlines. "Serena Duvall, fraud or foe?" Her phone buzzed with threats. An anonymous caller hissed, "Back off or you're done." Serena's knuckles whitened, but her voice stayed ice. "Try me," she called Ethan, her words cutting. "Your cousin's desperate. What's he hiding?" Ethan's voice cracked. "I don't know, but I'm in." He sent her a stolen board memo. Raymond's plan to sell Caldwell properties to a shady offshore firm. Serena's eyes narrowed. "He's covering tracks." Layla dug deeper, uncovering a deleted email from Raymond to Reed. "Burn the records. She's close." Serena's breath caught. The Brooklyn deal wasn't just a scandal. It was a crime, and Raymond was its architect. She'd bought 50% of their shares now, inching closer to control. Her fingers gripped the USB, her resolve steel. The Caldwells would face her fire, and it was only growing hotter. "They stole everything." Serena Duvall's voice cracked like a whip, her fist slamming the desk in Duvall Ventures' back room. Her eyes burned as she stared at the laptop, Layla's screen glowing with damning evidence. The email from Raymond to Councilman Reed, "Burn the records," unlocked a Pandora's box. Serena's pulse thundered, her knuckles white as she gripped the tattered notebook from Marcus Tate. It wasn't just a land deal. The Caldwells had orchestrated a calculated theft, seizing Brooklyn homes from black families for their high-rise empire. Her mother's eviction flashed in her mind. Same pain, same scars. Layla's fingers trembled, pulling up a hidden file, a 2012 contract signed by Margaret and Raymond, funneling bribes to Reed for forged permits. 50 families displaced, their savings gutted, their futures erased for profit. "They buried it," Layla whispered, her voice shaking. "Millions stolen, lives ruined." Serena's jaw clenched, rage boiling. "They thought no one would dig." She scrolled further, finding a memo. Raymond planned to sell Caldwell properties to an offshore firm, wiping the scandal clean before Serena could expose it. Her breath caught, sharp as a blade. "He's running." She called Marcus again, her voice steel. "You knew more. Talk." His words came fast, broken. Raymond threatened whistleblowers, paid cops to silence them. Serena's fist tightened, nails biting skin. The pearl necklace in her purse felt heavier, a chain linking her to this fight. She'd bought 50% of their shares, but this truth was her real weapon. "We've got them," she told Layla, her eyes glinting. "This ends at their gala." Layla nodded, her fingers already encrypting their evidence. Serena stood, her resolve iron. The Caldwells hadn't just scorned her, they'd crushed communities. Their empire would crumble under the weight of their own sins. "You'll never touch our empire, Serena," Raymond Caldwell's voice roared, his fist slamming the desk in his sleek office. Serena Duvall stood unflinching, her eyes blazing like molten steel. The truth she'd uncovered, the Brooklyn land theft, the bribes, the displaced families, burned in her chest. Her fingers twitched, clutching the USB drive with damning evidence from Ethan. Raymond's sneer twisted, his suit straining as he leaned forward. "A black nobody like you? You're out of your depth." His words sliced, echoing Margaret's scorn from years ago. But Serena's jaw clenched, her pulse hammering with defiance. "You know about the land deal," she shot back, her voice a blade. Raymond's eyes narrowed, cutting her off. "You know nothing." He stepped closer, his breath hot, venomous. "Keep digging, and you'll disappear." Serena's spine stiffened, but her lips curled, sharp. "Threaten me again, and you'll choke on your own lies." Raymond laughed, cold and jagged, his hand darting to his phone. "You're done," he hissed, texting a contact. Her phone buzzed, a warning from Layla. "They're tailing you." Serena's knuckles whitened, but her gaze never wavered. That night, shadows moved in a dark alley as Serena left her office. Two men emerged, their fists clenched, eyes glinting with malice. "Back off, Duval," one growled, swinging a pipe. Serena ducked, her heart pounding, and kicked his knee, sending him sprawling. The second lunged, but Layla's car screeched in, headlights blinding. "Get in!" Layla shouted. Serena dove inside, her breath ragged, nails biting her palms. "Raymond's desperate," she spat, her resolve iron. Layla's eyes widened. "He's scared." Serena nodded, clutching the USB tighter. The Caldwell's empire was cracking, and she'd pry it open with their own sins. "I'm not done yet, Raymond," Serena Duval's voice hissed, her knuckles bruising as she gripped the steering wheel. Her heart pounded, still racing from the alley ambush. Layla's car screeched through Brooklyn's streets, headlights slicing the night. The USB drive, clutched in Serena's hand, held the truth about the Caldwell's Brooklyn land theft. Bribes, forged permits, displaced families. But it wasn't enough. Raymond's threats, "You'll disappear," echoed, fueling her fire. Her jaw clenched, nails biting her palms. "He's scared," Layla said, her voice tight. "Good," Serena shot back, eyes blazing. "Fear means we're close." They pulled into Duval Ventures' back room, Serena's pulse thundering. She slammed the USB into her laptop, Layla's fingers flying across keys. "We need the smoking gun," Serena growled. The email from Raymond to Councilman Reed burned the records. It was a start, but they needed proof that Margaret signed off. Layla hacked deeper, cracking Caldwell's encrypted server. A file flashed up, a 2012 audio recording. Serena's breath caught as Margaret's voice crackled through. "Pay Reed. Silence the families. No one cares about Brooklyn trash." Serena's fists slammed the desk, rage boiling. "That's her," she snarled. "The queen of lies." Serena called Ethan, her voice ice. "You're either with me or against me." Ethan's reply shook. "I'm in." He'd slipped her a keycard to Caldwell Properties archive room, stolen from Raymond's desk. "Midnight," he whispered. "Guards are off." Serena nodded, her resolve steel. She and Layla slipped into the archive, their flashlights cutting shadows. Serena's fingers rifled through dusty files, her pulse spiking with every creak. A locked drawer yielded to Layla's pick, a ledger, Margaret's signature scrawled on a bribe payment. "Jackpot," Layla hissed. Serena's lips curled, sharp. "This ends them." As they exited, a guard's shout froze them. "Stop!" Serena's heart lurched, but she bolted, Layla behind. They dove into the car, tires squealing. Serena clutched the ledger, her eyes glinting. She'd secured 53% of Caldwell shares that morning, her final play. The gala was tomorrow. The Caldwell's sins would light her stage. "Your empire's built on stolen blood," Serena Duval's voice thundered, her grip on the microphone tight as a vice. The gala's elite froze, their champagne flutes trembling as her words slashed through the air like a guillotine. Her crimson gown burned under the spotlight, the pearl necklace, Ethan's cursed wedding gift, glinting like a battle scar around her throat. Margaret Caldwell's face crumpled, her hands clawing her chair, pearls snapping and scattering like shattered dreams. Raymond Caldwell, eyes wild with rage, lunged toward the stage. "You're a filthy liar," he roared, his fist shaking. Serena's gaze pierced him, sharp as a blade. "Sit down, Raymond," she snapped. her voice ice-cold steel. The room fell silent, phones flashing like a firing squad. Serena raised the ledger from the archive, its pages heavy with the Caldwell sins. Caldwell Properties stole Brooklyn homes, she declared, her pulse hammering in her ears. 50 families displaced, their lives crushed for your high-rise empire. Margaret signed the bribes to Councilman Reed. She clicked a remote, and Margaret's voice crackled through the speakers. Pay Reed, silence the families. No one cares about Brooklyn trash. Gasps ripped through the crowd, a tidal wave of shock. Margaret staggered to her feet, her voice breaking. That's forged, she shrieked, her hands trembling, betraying her. Serena's lips curled, lethal. Your own files beg to differ. She tossed the USB drive to a reporter. Its contents, contracts, emails, audio, already flooding online, igniting a firestorm across social media. Raymond charged the stage, his face twisted with venom. You're a nobody, a fraud, he spat, spit flying, his suit straining as he pointed. Serena stood unmoved, her stance iron. I own 53% of your company, she fired back, her words a bullet to his chest. You're finished. The crowd's murmurs erupted into chaos, chairs scraping, voices shouting. Ethan rose, his eyes red, locked on Serena, his mouth opening. Serena, please, he begged, voice cracking. She cut him off, her gaze slicing. You stood silent when they broke me, she hissed. Now watch. She turned to the guests, her voice a rolling thunder. Their legacy is a lie, built on greed, theft, and silence. I'm tearing it down, brick by brick. Reporters swarmed, cameras blinding, their questions a frenzy. Raymond lunged again, his fists swinging wildly, but security pinned him, his screams drowned by the uproar. Margaret collapsed into her chair, sobbing, her empire crumbling in real time. Serena's eyes swept the room unyielding, her jaw clenched tight. This isn't just revenge, she said, her voice low, searing every soul present. It's justice for those you erased. A reporter shouted, Ms. Duval, what's next? Serena's fingers brushed the pearl necklace, her resolve a blazing inferno. She'd burned their world to ash, but the flames were far from out. The Caldwell's reckoning had begun, and she was its architect. You're a disgrace, Raymond. Serena Duval's voice cut like a blade, her fists slamming the boardroom table. The Caldwell Properties executives froze, their faces pale as Serena stood at the head, her eyes blazing. Raymond Caldwell slumped in his chair, his smirk gone, his hands trembling. Her gala bombshell, exposing the Brooklyn land theft with Margaret's audio and the ledger, had shattered their empire. Serena's pulse thundered, her knuckles white as she clutched the gavel. You're fired, she declared, her words echoing. Face the law for your crimes. Raymond's jaw dropped, his voice a rasp. You can't. She leaned in, her gaze steel. I own you now. Margaret's chair scraped, her pearls clinking as she stood, face ashen. This is our legacy, she hissed, cutting Serena off. Serena's lips curled, sharp. It's mine. The board voted, hands shaking, expelling Raymond. Police waited outside, cuffs gleaming. Serena's voice sliced again. The Brooklyn families get justice today. She slid a document forward. Reparations for the displaced, signed with her name. Raymond lunged, his shout ragged, but guards dragged him out, his curses fading. Margaret collapsed back, her eyes hollow. Serena turned to Ethan, silent in the corner. Speak or stay nothing, she snapped. He whispered, I'm sorry, his face crumbling. Serena's jaw clenched, unmoved. The scandal's knots unraveled, bribes exposed, Reed arrested, Caldwell's name tarnished forever. Serena stood tall, her resolve iron. Justice wasn't just served, it was carved in her name, a warning to those who'd scorned her. You built your empire on stolen lives, Raymond. Serena Duval's voice roared, her fist slamming the boardroom table with a crack that silenced the room. Her eyes blazed like wildfire, pinning Raymond Caldwell to his chair. His smirk vanished, hands trembling, sweat beading on his brow. Serena's gala bombshell, Margaret's audio confessing to bribes, the ledger exposing the Brooklyn land theft, had shattered Caldwell Properties' facade. Her pulse pounded, knuckles white as she gripped the gavel, her 53% ownership ablated at their throats. "You're done," she declared, voice slicing like steel. "Face the law." Raymond lurched forward, his voice a desperate rasp. "You can't take us down." Serena's lips curled, sharp as a razor. "I already have." She turned to the executives, their faces pale, pens shaking. "Vote him out," she commanded. Hands rose one by one, expelling Raymond. His shout cracked. "This is my family." Serena leaned in, her gaze lethal. "Not anymore." Guards stormed in, cuffs gleaming, dragging Raymond out as he cursed, his voice fading into echoes. Serena's jaw clenched, unyielding. Justice for the Brooklyn families wasn't a hope. It was her decree. Margaret stood, her pearls clinking like chains, face drained of blood. "You're destroying our legacy," she hissed, cutting Serena off. Serena's eyes narrowed, unflinching. "Your legacy's built on lies." She slid a document across the table. Reparations for 50 displaced families, signed with her name. Margaret's hands shook, her defiance crumbling. Serena turned to Ethan, slouched in the corner, eyes hollow. "Speak," she snapped, her voice ice. "Or stay nothing." Ethan's whisper broke. "I failed you." Serena's fist tightened, unmoved. The scandal unraveled. Councilman Reed arrested, bribes exposed, Caldwell's name dragged through the mud. Reporters swarmed outside, their questions a storm. Serena stood tall, her resolve iron. The Caldwell's sins were buried, and her justice rose from their ashes, a monument to those they'd scorned. "You built this on stolen lives." Serena Duvall's voice slashed through the press conference, her fist slamming the podium. Her crimson suit burned under the camera flashes, the pearl necklace at her throat gleaming like a war trophy. The crowd, reporters, activists, displaced Brooklyn families, hung on her every word. Raymond was gone, indicted for bribery. Margaret, a broken shadow, had resigned. Serena, now chairwoman of Caldwell Properties, held their empire in her grip. Her pulse thundered, but her gaze was steel. "No more lies," she declared. "We rebuild with truth." She unveiled the Duvall Justice Fund, a $50 million commitment to repay families displaced by the Caldwell's 2012 land theft. Her fingers tightened on the podium, nails biting skin. "Every dollar stolen will be returned," she vowed, her voice ablaze. The crowd roared, fists raised, their pain mirrored in her own. Her mother's eviction, her community's scars. She'd turned their ledger of sins into a lifeline. Layla, her analyst, stood beside her, eyes shining with pride. "You're unstoppable," Layla whispered. Serena's lips curled, sharp. "They made me this way." Ethan Caldwell stepped forward, his face gaunt, tie loose. "I was complicit," he confessed, voice cracking. The cameras zoomed in, relentless. "I'm here to atone." Serena's jaw clenched, her eyes piercing him. "Prove it," she snapped. Ethan announced his resignation, redirecting his inheritance to the fund. "For Brooklyn," he said, voice low. Serena didn't flinch, but her fingers brushed the pearl necklace. His old gift, now her symbol of victory. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others skeptical. Ethan's shoulders sagged, but he met Serena's gaze. "I'll keep fighting," he muttered. She nodded once, cold. "You'd better." Serena turned to the families, her voice softening but firm. "This is your home, your justice." She handed a check to Marcus Tate, the retired planner who'd exposed the Caldwells. His hands shook, tears brimming. "You gave us back our voice," he choked. Serena gripped his hand, her resolve iron. "We're just starting." She outlined reforms, transparent hiring, minority-led projects, and no more backroom deals. Caldwell Properties would reflect the city's heart, not its greed. Reporters scribbled, phones flashed. A young girl from the crowd, eyes wide, clutched her mother's hand. "You're like a queen," she said. Serena knelt, her smile fierce. "No, you are." The girl's grin lit up, a spark of hope. Layla leaned in, her voice low. "They're watching, Serena. The world." Serena stood, her heels clicking like gunfire. "Good. Let them see what justice looks like." She'd reshaped an empire, not for revenge, but for redemption. The Caldwell's name was Ash, hers was fire, burning a path for those they'd crushed. The fight wasn't over. It was a beacon for change. "They'll never silence us again," Serena Duval's voice rang out, her fist raised at the ribbon cutting for Duval Tower, once Caldwell Properties' crown jewel. Her eyes blazed. The pearl necklace, Ethan's old gift, now her emblem of victory, glinting at her throat. Her pulse thundered as she faced the crowd. Brooklyn families once displaced by the Caldwell's greed, now cheering her name. Serena's jaw clenched, her knuckles tight. She'd turned their empire into a beacon, renaming it to bury their legacy. "This is our home," she declared, her words slicing through the air. "Built for us. By us." Layla, now COO, stood beside her, her smile sharp. "You did it," she whispered, handing Serena the scissors. Serena's fingers gripped them, slicing the ribbon clean. The crowd roared, their applause a tidal wave. Marcus Tate, the retired planner, stepped forward, his hands steady for the first time. "You gave us justice," he said, voice cracking. Serena's gaze softened, but her voice stayed steel. "You earned it." She'd funneled millions from the Duval Justice Fund to rebuild their homes, schools, lives. Her chest burned with purpose, not rage. Ethan approached, his tie loose, eyes heavy. "I'm trying," he said low. He joined the fund, working in Brooklyn's streets, facing families he'd failed. Serena's lips curled, not cruel but firm. "Keep trying." She turned away, her heels clicking, resolute. He'd lost her, but he'd gained a mission. Keshia, the young analyst, now led a scholarship program, her sister's business thriving. "You changed everything," Kesha said, her eyes shining. Serena nodded, her resolve iron. "We changed together." Reporters swarmed, their questions sharp. "What's next, Ms. Duval?" one shouted. Serena faced them, her voice clear. "No more empires built on lies. We lift each other." The crowd hushed, phones flashing. She'd rewritten the rules. Diverse hires, transparent deals, no shadows. The Caldwell sins had fueled her fire, but her vision forged a new family. Not blood, but shared fight. Layla handed her a plaque, Duval Tower for Justice. Serena's fingers traced it, her pulse steady. "This is just the start," she said, low, fierce. She stepped back, eyes scanning the crowd, faces like her mother's, her own. The pearl necklace felt light now, no longer a chain. Serena stood taller, her shadow stretching across the city. The lesson wasn't revenge, it was rebuilding, proving no one's born to bow. The Caldwells were a memory, she was the future. Serena Duval's story isn't just about revenge, it's a fire-forged testament to never letting others define your worth. Scorned by the Caldwell clan's venom, she clawed her way from their shadows, seizing their empire and rewriting its sins into justice. Her pearl necklace, once a chain of betrayal, became her crown. The Caldwell's downfall, Raymond's disgrace, Margaret's collapse, Ethan's guilt, proved that power built on lies crumbles under truth. Serena's triumph, from exposing their Brooklyn land theft to building the Duval Justice Fund, screams one truth. You don't just survive injustice, you reshape it. Her legacy, etched in Duval Tower, isn't about wealth. It's about lifting those crushed by greed, proving that true strength rises from pain, not privilege. For every soul told they don't belong, Serena's story roars, "You are enough." What hit you hardest? Was it Serena's steel-eyed defiance, her takedown of the Caldwells, or the hope she sparked for Brooklyn's families? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share what stirred your heart or fired you up. Have you faced a moment where you had to fight to prove your worth? Tell us your story. Let's build a community that lifts each other up. Your voice matters, just like Serena's. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and join us for more stories that rip the mask off power's ugly face. These tales aren't just entertainment, they're a call to stand tall, no matter who tries to push you down. Thank you for watching, for feeling this with us. Your support fuels these stories, and we're grateful for every one of you. Until next time, keep fighting for your truth. Keep rising from the ashes. We'll see you soon with another story that cuts deep and doesn't look away. Stay fierce. You don't belong here. Araminta's venomous snarl slices through the Charleston reunion, her silver scissors savaging Zola's cornrows, golden threads spilling like fractured vows across the Devington mansion's gleaming floor. The stunned clan gapes as Zola's Gullah heritage is shredded, her pride bleeding under the chandelier's taunting glare. Rain lashes the windows, amplifying the moment's fury. Will Zola shatter beneath this cruel assault or forge defiance from her pain? In 30 minutes, a seismic truth about her identity will mute the Devington dynasty, their arrogance crumbling in a tempest of revelation. What will this fierce black woman unleash next? Can her roots withstand such a blade? Dive into her saga of vengeance and redemption. The Devington mansion loomed over Charleston's battery, its white columns gleaming under a bruised, rain-heavy sky. A monument to old Southern wealth that seemed to whisper Zola didn't belong. Inside, the kitchen pulsed with the earthy warmth of her grandmother's Gullah gumbo, shrimp and okra simmering in a cast-iron pot, the scent weaving through the sterile elegance of polished oak and crystal chandeliers. Zola, 27, moved with a dancer's grace, her cornrows adorned with golden threads glinting like low-country fireflies, each twist a defiant hymn to her heritage. Her apron, dusted with cornmeal, clung to her sweat-damp skin as she stirred, the rhythmic clink of threads a quiet rebellion against the mansion's cold grandeur. She glanced at her phone, Reese's message glowing. "You're my light, Zola. Shine today." Her heart clenched. He was stuck in Savannah, a business deal snaring him, leaving her to face his family alone. The Devington reunion, a showcase of lineage and pride, felt like a battlefield, and Zola was armed only with her recipes and resolve. She'd spent months blending Gullah dishes with Devington staples, hoping to stitch herself into their tapestry. Her fingers traced a golden thread in her hair, a memory flickering, her grandmother's hands weaving stories of sea islands, of roots no storm could uproot. "Hold fast, child," her grandmother's voice echoed, grounding her as rain tapped the windows like a warning drum. Voices spilled from the foyer, sharp and foreign, as early guests arrived, their laughter slicing through the kitchen's warmth. Zola smoothed her apron, her pulse quickening. She'd faced the Devingtons' veiled slights before. 2 years of marriage, countless dinners where her dishes were exotic, but never enough. They were old money, their wealth spun from cotton and shipping, and to Araminta, Reese's mother, Zola was a flaw in their flawless legacy, a black woman with no pedigree to match their name. The kitchen door swung open, and Araminta's heels clicked like a metronome on the hardwood. Her ash-blonde chignon was severe, her lavender perfume a cloying invasion. She paused, green eyes raking over the platters of cornbread and collards with a curled lip. "These dishes are ambitious," she said, her voice silk-wrapped steel. "Perhaps too much for our guests, Zola." Her gaze snagged on Zola's cornrows, the golden threads catching the light like defiant stars. "And that hair," she added, her tone icing over. "It's a statement, dear. Devington events demand restraint." Zola's fingers tightened on the wooden spoon, her smile practiced but brittle. "I thought I'd honor Charleston's roots, Araminta," she said, her voice steady despite the sting. "My family's Gullah traditions belong here too." Araminta's lips thinned, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. "This is our legacy, not yours," she said, her words a blade aimed at Zola's core. She turned, heels retreating, leaving a chill that lingered like the rain outside. Zola exhaled, her heart thudding. She checked the gumbo, its aroma a hug from her grandmother's kitchen, a tether to her strength. She wasn't here to shrink. The front door chimed, more guests flooding the foyer, their voices a stark contrast to the kitchen's solitude. Carrying a tray of sweet tea, Zola stepped into the dining hall, where chandeliers cast golden fractures across mahogany. Her cornrows swayed, a vibrant defiance against the pastel dresses and tailored suits. Elise, Reese's cousin, took a glass, her smile tentative. "This smells incredible, Zola," she said, but her eyes darted to the doorway where Araminta's shadow loomed and her warmth faltered. Zola's heart sank, but she pressed on, offering tea to an uncle with a gray mustache. He grunted. "Nice spread," his gaze lingering on her hair before sliding away, a mirror of Araminta's judgment. Cora, Reese's aunt, hovered near the buffet, her kind eyes clouded with hesitation. "You've worked hard, child," she murmured, but her voice dropped as Araminta's heels echoed closer. Even kindness here was fragile, caged by Araminta's presence. Zola returned to the kitchen, her phone silent. No new word from Reese. The ache of his absence grew, but she whispered, "Just get through today." Her fingers brushed her cornrows, the golden threads clicking softly, a prayer to her ancestors' strength. The rain thickened, its rhythm a steady drum against the mansion's roof, urging her to hold fast. But Araminta's words, "Our legacy, not yours," clung like damp air, a warning of the storm brewing. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a proving ground, and Zola's only shield was the love she carried for Reese and the heritage woven into every golden thread. Zola's heart still thrummed with the sting of Araminta's words, "Our legacy, not yours," as she carried a tray of collards into the dining hall, where the Devington reunion pulsed with forced civility. The chandelier's golden light fractured across mahogany, casting shadows over pastel dresses and starched collars, a sea of guarded eyes that flickered to her cornrows, their golden threads glinting defiantly. Rain battered the windows, a relentless drum urging her to stand tall. She set the tray down, her fingers grazing the threads, her grandmother's voice whispering, "Hold fast, child." But the air was thick, charged with whispers that pricked like thorns, and Araminta's lavender scent lingered, a predator's trail circling closer. The hall buzzed as guests settled, their chatter a veneer over the tension Zola felt in her bones. She moved silently, refilling glasses, her apron a thin shield against their stares. Elise, Reese's cousin, hovered near the buffet, her earlier warmth now a hesitant glance. "These collards are perfect," she murmured, but her eyes darted to Araminta, who stood at the table's head, her ash-blonde chignon a crown of control. Zola nodded, her smile tight, the weight of Araminta's disdain pressing harder. Cora, Reese's aunt, offered a fleeting look of sympathy, but her silence spoke louder, a cage of complicity that trapped Zola's hope. Araminta raised a crystal glass, her voice ringing out. "To Devington heritage," she declared, her green eyes sweeping the room, landing on Zola like a blade. "We honor tradition, not distractions." The words were a dart, cloaked in elegance, and the room stilled, glasses pausing midair. Zola's pulse roared, but she kept her chin high, her cornrows swaying like a banner of her Gula pride. "You can't erase me," she thought, her grandmother's strength afire in her chest. A guest emboldened by wine called out, "Zola, tell us about these dishes." The question was a crack in the wall, and she seized it, her voice soft but clear. "My grandmother was Gula, born on the islands. These recipes, collards, gumbo, are her stories, our history." The room leaned in, some nodding, Elise's eyes softening. Even the gray-mustached uncle grunted approval. For a moment, Zola felt the bridge she'd dreamed of building, her heritage weaving into theirs. But Araminta's glass clinked sharply against the table, shattering the warmth. "Enough," she snapped, her smile ablaze. "We're here for our history." The dismissal was a whip, snapping the room back to her command. Zola's chest tightened, her moment snuffed out, but she held her ground, her cornrows a heavy crown under the chandelier's glare. Araminta's voice rose again, saccharine and sharp. "The ribbon-cutting ceremony, a Devington tradition, binds our legacy. Zola, you'll assist." Her eyes glinted with something darker than triumph, a trap woven into her words. Zola nodded, her throat tight, sensing the danger but bound by duty to Reese, to the life they'd built. She stepped forward, clutching the crimson ribbon, its silk cool against her palms. The clan watched, their murmurs a low hum, oblivious to the storm gathering in Araminta's gaze. Elise shifted uncomfortably, Cora's brow furrowing, but neither spoke. The rain's rhythm intensified, a heartbeat urging Zola to brace herself. "Hold it taut, dear," Araminta said, her voice dripping venom as she raised the silver scissors, their heirloom blades flashing under the light. "This ribbon seals our pride," she began, her words for the crowd, but her eyes locked on Zola, a silent accusation. You don't belong. Zola met her gaze, her voice steady. Unity is beautiful, Araminta. I'm honored to be part. The words, laced with grace, were a spark in the tinder of Araminta's resentment. A guest murmured approval, Elise's lips curving, but Araminta's face contorted, her control fraying like a taut thread. In a swift, venomous motion, Araminta lunged, not at the ribbon, but at Zola's cornrows. The scissors sliced, a sickening snip echoing as a thick L braid fell, golden threads clattering to the oak floor like shattered dreams. This is a Devington event, not your stage, Araminta hissed, her voice raw with triumph. The room froze, the rain's roar the only sound, amplifying the violation. Zola stood motionless, her hand clutching the fallen braid, its threads digging into her palm. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with a haunting defiance, a fire that refused to die. The pain was a tidal wave. Her hair, her grandmother's legacy, torn away before this gilded crowd. Elise covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Cora shook her head, her silence a heavier betrayal than Araminta's act. The clan gaped, their glasses forgotten, but none spoke, their complicity a suffocating weight. Araminta sat, her smirk gleaming, the scissors glinting in her hand, believing she'd broken Zola. But Zola bent slowly, picking up another braid, its golden threads catching the light like defiant stars. Her movements were deliberate, a silent vow. You won't erase me. Her eyes met Araminta's, burning with a strength that made the matriarch's smirk falter. The room held its breath, the chandelier's light flickering, as if bowing to Zola's resolve, as the storm outside roared on, promising a reckoning yet to come. The echo of golden threads clattering to the oak floor still haunted Zola as she stood by the dining hall's buffet, the severed braid clutched in her trembling hand. 30 minutes had passed since Araminta's scissors carved through her cornrows, and the Devington reunion churned on, its forced gaiety a cruel mockery of her pain. Rain lashed the windows, a relentless roar that mirrored the storm in her chest. The chandelier's light flickered, casting jagged shadows over the clan's pastel dresses and tailored suits, their eyes sliding past her like she was a ghost. Zola's heart pounded, her shorn hair a raw wound, but her gaze burned with a fire no blade could douse. You won't erase me, she vowed, her grandmother's voice a whisper in her soul. Hold fast, child. She forced her hands steady, arranging a platter of gumbo, its earthy warmth a fading tether to her gullah roots. The clan's murmurs buzzed like wasps, their glances sharp but fleeting, as if her pain was a stain they couldn't bear to see. Elise, Reese's cousin, lingered near the table, her fingers twisting a napkin, her earlier warmth now a shadowed guilt. Zola, she started, but her voice faltered under Araminta's distant glare. The matriarch seated at the hall's head, her smirk a silent crown. Zola nodded, her smile a brittle mask. It's okay, Elise, she lied, her voice soft but steady, the braid in her hand a lifeline to her pride. Cora, Reese's aunt, approached, her kind eyes clouded with remorse. You didn't deserve that, child, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clink of glasses. But she stepped back as Araminta's lavender scent drifted closer, a reminder of her unchallenged reign. Zola's chest tightened, the clan's silence a heavier blow than the scissors' snip. She moved to refill a tray of sweet tea, her shorn hair brushing her shoulders, each missing thread a pulse of loss. The rain's rhythm urged her to endure, but the weight of their stares pressed like a tide, threatening to drown her resolve. A guest, an uncle with a gray mustache, took a glass, his gaze lingering on her cropped hair before muttering, "Shame about the display." The words were a needle, piercing her armor, but Zola's jaw clenched, her response a quiet fire. "It's my heritage, not a display," she said, her eyes locking with his until he looked away. The room's hum faltered, a few heads turning, but Araminta's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Zola, more ice for the guests. Don't dawdle." The order was a public lash, a reminder of her place, and the clan complied, their silence a cage. Zola retreated to the kitchen, the gumbo's aroma wrapping around her like a hug. But even that couldn't soothe the ache. Her phone lay silent. No word from Reese. His absence a hollow wound. She leaned against the counter, the braid in her hand glinting under the dim light, its golden threads a defiant constellation. She closed her eyes, her grandmother's voice rising through the fog of pain. Your hair is your story, child. No one can steal that. Zola's fingers tightened, the threads digging into her palm, grounding her. She wasn't broken, not yet. But the kitchen, once a sanctuary, felt like a shrinking cell, its warmth no match for the chill of Araminta's triumph. The dining hall's chatter filtered through the door, a stark contrast to her solitude. Zola tied her shorn hair back, the remaining threads clicking softly, a prayer to her ancestors' strength. She whispered, I'm still here, her voice a vow against the violation. The rain's roar softened, but the storm within her burned brighter, fueled by the heritage Araminta had tried to sever. She stepped back into the hall, tray in hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. Elise watched her, guilt etched in her face, while Cora's lips trembled, as if on the verge of speaking. But Araminta's presence loomed, her smirk a silent dare, her scissors now displayed on the table, a gleaming relic of her cruelty. A cousin, emboldened by wine, leaned toward Elise, his whisper carrying, She doesn't fit, does she? Elise's eyes flicked to Zola, a flicker of defiance breaking through. Maybe we're the ones who don't, she murmured, her voice barely audible. The words were a spark, a crack in the clan's complicity, but they couldn't erase the weight of Zola's loss. Her phone buzzed, a text from Reese. Delayed again. You okay, love? Her fingers hovered, wanting to confess the wound, but she typed, holding on. Hurry. She couldn't burden him, not now. The rain's rhythm pulsed, a heartbeat urging her to endure. Zola's gaze fell on the scissors, their silver edges a taunting reminder. The ceremony was over, but the violation lingered, a scar on her soul. She clutched the braid tighter, its golden threads a beacon in the dim hall. Araminta's eyes met hers, sharp and unyielding, but Zola stood taller, her shorn hair framing a face alight with purpose. The clan's whispers grew, their glances heavier, as if sensing a shift. The air thickened, the chandelier's light wavering, and Zola knew this moment was a precipice. 30 minutes had carved a wound, but the next would bring a reckoning, a truth she couldn't yet name. Zola's whispered vow, I'm still here, still burned in her chest as she stood by the dining hall's buffet, the severed braid in her hand, a pulsing reminder of her Gullah roots. The Devington reunion droned on, its chatter a hollow hum beneath the rain's fading roar, but the air crackled with an unspoken shift, as if the chandelier's light sensed a storm breaking. Zola's shorn hair framed her face, its golden threads glinting like embers, her eyes fixed on the crowd, daring them to see her. Araminta sat at the table's head, her smirk a fragile mask, the silver scissors gleaming beside her like a trophy of her cruelty. Elise's guilty glance lingered, Cora's lips trembling with unsaid words, but the clan's silence held, a suffocating weight. The dining hall doors burst open, a gust of damp air slicing through the room's haze. Every head turned as Malcolm and Lena Vanguard strode in, their rain-soaked coats dripping onto the polished floor, their presence a thunderclap that stilled the clinking glasses. Malcolm, tall and broad-shouldered, his graying hair cropped close, carried an air of unyielding authority, his dark eyes sweeping the room with quiet fury. Lena beside him was a vision of grace, her cornrows adorned with golden threads mirroring Zola's lost braids, her face etched with a mother's unspoken grief. The clan froze, their murmurs snuffed out, as Araminta's smirk faltered, her hands gripping the table's edge. "Who are you?" Araminta demanded, her voice shrill, a crack in her polished veneer. "This is a private Devington event." But her words trembled, her green eyes darting as Malcolm's gaze locked on Zola, softening with a warmth that pierced her heart. "We're here for our daughter," he said, his voice a low, unyielding current that silenced the room. Zola's breath caught, the braid in her hand suddenly heavy, its golden threads a bridge to a past she couldn't grasp. Lena stepped closer, her silk dress rustling, her eyes brimming with tears as they met Zola's. "My baby," she whispered, her voice breaking, a single tear tracing her cheek. The room spun, the chandelier's light fracturing into a kaleidoscope of gold. Zola's knees trembled, her fingers tightening around the braid, a memory flickering, gentle hands weaving her hair, laughter under a low-country sky. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice raw, her eyes searching Lena's face. So like her own, yet carved with years of loss. Malcolm's deep voice cut through the haze. "Zola, you're our daughter lost to us for 20 years. His words were a beacon, piercing the fog of her amnesia. "A car accident when you were 7 stole you from us," he said, his tone steady but searing. "We never stopped searching." Araminta lurched to her feet, her chair scraping the oak floor. "This is absurd," she snapped, her voice a desperate claw at control. "She's my son's wife, nothing more." But her knuckles whitened, her authority fraying, as the clan's eyes shifted to the vanguards, whose poise dwarfed the Devingtons' fading grandeur. Elise whispered to Cora, her voice barely audible. "Could it be true?" Cora's nod was subtle, her gaze on Zola softening with guilt. The room's murmurs grew, a tide turning against Araminta's reign. Lena stepped closer, her golden-threaded braids catching the light like a mirror to Zola's loss. "These braids were our bond," she said, her voice thick with love, her fingers trembling as they brushed Zola's shorn hair. "I taught you to weave them, stories in every knot, our gullah strength, our history." Zola's heart lurched, a spark of recognition flaring despite the void. She saw it, a porch swing, a woman's hands, the scent of jasmine. It was faint, like a star behind clouds, but it was hers. "I remember something," she whispered, her eyes locked on Lena's, searching for truth. Malcolm's gaze swept the room, a challenge to the Devingtons' pride. "You attacked our daughter's heritage," he said, his tone even but cutting, pinning Araminta like a specimen. "Her braids carried our legacy, and you tried to cut it away." The words were a gavel, and the clans shifted, their loyalty fracturing. Elise's eyes widened, a flicker of respect breaking through her guilt. Cora murmured, "We've been blind," her voice low but clear, a rebuke to Araminta's cruelty. Araminta's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she clutched the table. "You expect us to believe this charade?" she demanded, but her voice cracked, her control slipping like sand. The vanguard stood unmoved, their presence a fortress. Zola's braid felt lighter in her hand, its golden threads a lifeline to a past rushing toward her. The rain softened to a murmur, but the dining hall's air thickened, charged with a truth that threatened to shatter the Devington dynasty. Zola stood taller, her shorn hair a badge of survival, her eyes burning with a question she wasn't ready to voice. The clan watched, breathless, as the doors creaked again, footsteps echoing in the foyer, heavy and deliberate, promising a storm that would upend this house of pride. The footsteps in the foyer faded, but their echo lingered like a heartbeat in Zola's chest. Malcolm's words, "Zola, you're our daughter," still ringing as she stood frozen, the severed braid in her hand pulsing with golden threads. The dining hall's air was thick, the chandelier's light wavering as if bowing to the truth unfolding. Lena's tear-streaked face, framed by cornrows mirroring Zola's lost ones, held her gaze, a mother's love piercing the fog of her amnesia. Araminta's shrill protest hung unanswered, her authority crumbling as the Devington clan watched, their glasses forgotten, their murmurs silenced by the vanguard's unyielding presence. Zola's knees trembled, but her eyes burned with a question she couldn't yet voice, her heart teetering on the edge of a past reclaimed. Malcolm stepped forward, his broad frame a fortress, his voice steady but laced with grief. 20 years ago, a car accident stole you from us, Zola, he said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. You were 7, playing near the low-country marshes. A drunk driver hit our car, and you vanished in the chaos. Taken to a hospital, then lost to foster care. Amnesia buried your memories, but we never stopped searching. His words carved through the room, each one a stone in the Devingtons' crumbling pride. Zola's breath hitched, the braid in her hand a sudden weight, its golden threads glinting like fragments of a life she couldn't grasp. Lena's silk dress rustled as she closed the distance, her fingers trembling as they touched Zola's shorn hair. "These braids were our ritual," she whispered, her voice thick with love. "Every summer on our porch, I'd weave your hair, threading gold for our Gullah ancestors, stories of strength, of sea islands, of home." Zola's heart lurched, a memory flaring. A woman's hands, gentle and sure, knotting her hair under a jasmine-scented sky, laughter weaving through the breeze. It was faint, like a tide pulling back, but it was hers. "I see it," she stammered, her voice raw, tears pricking her eyes. "A porch. Your hands. I remember." Araminta lurched to her feet, her chair screeching against the oak floor. "This is a farce," she snapped, her voice a desperate claw at control. "She's my son's wife, a nobody." But her words faltered, her ash-blonde chignon unraveling, her green eyes darting as the clan's gazes shifted. "Elise," Reese's cousin, whispered to Cora, her voice trembling. "She looks like Lena. It's true, isn't it?" Cora's nod was slow, her eyes heavy with guilt. "We've been cruel," she murmured, her voice a quiet rebuke. The room's murmurs swelled, a tide of doubt eroding Araminta's reign. Malcolm's gaze never wavered, pinning Araminta like a blade. "You attacked our daughter's heritage," he said, his tone even but searing. "Her braids carried our legacy, vanguard legacy, built on Atlanta's skyline, on integrity, not prejudice. You thought you could erase her." The words were a thunderclap, and the clan flinched, their loyalty fracturing. Elise's eyes widened, a spark of respect breaking through her guilt. Cora's hands trembled, her earlier silence now a weight she couldn't bear. A cousin muttered, "We didn't know," his voice hollow, as if the truth had stripped their pride bare. Zola's fingers tightened around the braid, its golden threads a lifeline to the past Lena's words had unlocked. She saw more now, a child running through marshes, a mother's laughter, a father's steady hand. The memories were shards, jagged and incomplete, but they were hers, stitching her to the vanguards. "I don't know everything," she said, her voice a whisper yet caring, her eyes locked on Lena's. "But I feel you. I feel home." Lena's tearful smile was a balm, her hand cupping Zola's cheek, the touch a bridge across 20 years. Araminta's face drained of color, her hands clawing the table as she stammered, "You can't take my family." But her voice was a ghost, her authority dissolving under the vanguard stature. The clan's whispers grew, some turning away, their eyes avoiding Araminta's. Elise stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "You went too far, Araminta," she said, her guilt giving way to resolve. Cora nodded, her voice breaking. "She's more than we deserved, and we failed her." The words were a crack in the Devington facade, a spark of change in a house of pride. Zola stood taller, her shorn hair framing a face alight with purpose. The braid in her hand felt lighter, its golden threads a promise of stories yet to be woven. The chandelier's light steadied, as if honoring her truth. Malcolm's eyes softened, a father's pride breaking through his fury. "You're not alone anymore, Zola," he said, his voice a vow. Lena's hand lingered, her golden threaded braids a mirror to Zola's loss, a pledge to rebuild. The rain outside softened to a hush, but the dining hall pulsed with a new storm. A truth that shook the Devingtons' foundations, threatening to topple their legacy. Zola's heart raced, her gaze shifting to the foyer, where the echo of footsteps promised more. A reckoning that would rewrite her story. Zola's whispered, "I feel home," still echoed in her heart. The severed braid in her hand, a golden threaded anchor to the vanguard's truth. The dining hall pulsed with a charged silence, the chandelier's light flickering as if straining under the weight of revelation. Malcolm and Lena stood resolute, their presence a fortress against the Devington clan's crumbling pride. Araminta's trembling hands clutched the table, her ash-blonde chignon unraveling, her green eyes darting like a cornered animal's. The clan's murmurs swelled, a tide of doubt washing over their once unshakable loyalty. Zola stood taller, her shorn hair framing a face alight with purpose. The rain outside softening to a murmur, as if the low country itself held its breath for the reckoning unfolding. Malcolm's voice cut through the haze, steady and searing. The vanguards built an empire on integrity. Atlanta's skyline, schools, communities, he said, his dark eyes pinning Araminta. Your family's wealth, built on cotton and control, pales in comparison. You attacked our daughter's heritage, thinking it made her small. You were wrong. His words were a gavel, striking the Devington legacy. A cousin, his face flushed from wine, shifted uncomfortably, his earlier condescension gone. Elise, Reese's cousin, leaned toward Cora, her whisper sharp with guilt. We let this happen, she said, her eyes on Zola, now brimming with respect. Cora's hands trembled, her voice low but firm. Araminta, you've shamed us all. Araminta's face paled, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the table. You can't rewrite our history, she snapped, but her voice cracked, a hollow echo in the hall. The clan's eyes turned from her, their silence a betrayal sharper than words. A distant uncle muttered, We didn't know she was a vanguard, his tone laced with fear, as if the name carried a weight they couldn't bear. Malcolm's gaze swept the room, unyielding. You didn't know because you didn't see her, he said. You saw her hair, her skin, and judged. That's your failure, not hers. The clan flinched, their glasses forgotten, their pride unraveling like a frayed tapestry. Zola's heart raced, the braid in her hand lighter now, its golden threads a testament to the heritage Araminta had tried to erase. She felt Lena's touch on her shoulder, a mother's warmth grounding her, and Malcolm's steady gaze, a father's promise. The memories, porch swings, jasmine, braided stories, flickered brighter, stitching her to a past she was ready to claim. I'm not your nobody, she said, her voice soft but cutting, aimed at Araminta. I'm Zola Vanguard, and my roots are deeper than your hate. The declaration was a thunderclap, silencing the murmurs. Elise's eyes widened, a nod of respect, while Cora's lips curved, her guilt giving way to admiration. Araminta slumped, her hands shaking, the silver scissors on the table a forgotten relic of her failed crusade. This is my family, she whispered, but the words were hollow, her authority a ghost. The clan's whispers turned to accusations, a cousin hissing, You've cost us everything. Another guest, a woman in a pastel dress, murmured, The vanguards, they're untouchable. The room's air thickened, the chandelier's light dimming as if mourning the Devington legacy. Malcolm stepped closer to Zola, his voice low but resolute. We've offered a partnership with your family, Araminta, but not after this. Your prejudice has burned that bridge. The words were final, a financial and moral blow that left the clan reeling. Elise stood, her voice trembling but clear. Zola, we were wrong, she said, her eyes meeting Zola's. I should have spoken up. I'm sorry. The apology was raw, a crack in the Devington armor, and Cora nodded, her voice breaking. You're more family than we've been, child. We've got learning to do. The clan's murmurs softened, some heads bowing, their complicity laid bare. Zola's eyes stung, not with tears, but with a fierce resolve. She clutched the braid, its golden threads a pulse of strength, her grandmother's voice whispering, Your story lives, child. She wasn't alone anymore. The vanguard's presence was a shield, their legacy a fire that warmed her soul. The dining hall doors creaked, and a new figure burst through, rain-soaked and breathless. Reese's voice shattered the silence, raw with horror. Mother, what have you done? He demanded, his eyes locking on Zola's shorn hair, his tailored coat dripping onto the floor. Araminta stammered, I was protecting our name. But Reese ignored her, rushing to Zola, his hands framing her face. I'm so sorry, love, he whispered, his voice breaking, his thumb brushing her cheek. Zola leaned into his touch, the ache of his absence easing, her braid still clutched as a testament to her survival. I'm still here, Reese, she said, her voice steady, her eyes burning with purpose. Reese turned to the clan, his gaze fierce. Zola's my wife, and she's more Devington than any of you, he said, his words a gauntlet thrown at Araminta's feet. The clan shifted, their silence a reckoning, their eyes darting between Zola and the vanguards. Lena's hand tightened on Zola's shoulder, her voice warm but firm. "We'd like to host a gathering, bring our families together," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "There's room for change if you're willing." The offer hung, a challenge to the Devington pride, and Elise nodded, her guilt replaced by resolve. The rain outside hushed, but the storm within Zola burned brighter, her identity a flame no blade could extinguish, ready to reshape this house of fractured legacies. Reese's touch still warmed Zola's cheek, his anguished whisper, "I'm so sorry, love," a lifeline anchoring her to the dining hall's charged silence. The vanguard stood beside her, Malcolm's commanding presence and Lena's golden-threaded braids a mirror to her own, their offer of a new gathering hanging like a challenge to the Devington clan's fractured pride. Araminta slumped at the table's head, her trembling hands a faint shadow of her former reign, the silver scissors beside her a mocking relic. The chandelier's light flickered, as if recoiling from the truth that had shattered the reunion's facade. Zola clutched her severed braid, its golden threads pulsing with her Gullah heritage, her heart alight with a fire that no blade could snuff out. The clan sat frozen, their glasses abandoned, their eyes darting between Zola and the vanguards, unable to meet the weight of their own complicity. Elise's apology lingered in the air, Cora's remorse a quiet echo, but now the room held its breath, the rain outside a hushed murmur, as if Charleston itself awaited Zola's next move. Reese's grip tightened, his voice raw with fury as he faced his mother. "You tried to break her, Mother," he said, his words slicing through the silence. "You cut her hair, her heritage to protect your name. But Zola's more family than you've ever been." Araminta's face drained to ash, her lips parting, but no words came. Her green eyes, once sharp with control, now flickered with panic, her chignon unraveling like her authority. I was safeguarding our legacy," she stammered, her voice a brittle thread. But the clan's silence was a guillotine, their gazes turning from her to Zola. A cousin in a tailored suit shifted, his earlier whispers of doubt now a heavy stillness. Another guest, a woman in pastel, murmured, "We were wrong," her voice barely audible, a crack in the Devington armor. Zola stepped forward, her shorn hair framing a face carved with purpose, the braid in her hand a banner of survival. "You thought you could cut me down, Araminta," she said, her voice steady, ringing through the hall like a bell. "But my roots, Gullah roots, Vanguard roots, are stronger than your hate. I'm Zola Vanguard, and I belong here, not as your son's wife, but as me." The declaration was a thunderclap, silencing the last of the clan's murmurs. Elise's eyes glistened, a nod of respect breaking through her guilt. Cora's hands clasped tightly, her voice soft but clear. "You've shown us what family means, child." The clan's silence deepened, a collective surrender to the truth. A distant uncle, his gray mustache twitching, looked away, his earlier condescension buried under shame. Another guest whispered, "She's a vanguard," the name carrying a weight that dwarfed the Devingtons' fading grandeur. Araminta's hands trembled, the scissors untouched, her eyes darting as if seeking an ally. But none remained. The chandelier's light dimmed, as if bowing to Zola's triumph, its golden glow catching the threads in her hand, like stars reborn. Malcolm's voice broke the hush, steady and resolute. "Your family's legacy is built on exclusion," he said, his gaze sweeping the clan. "Ours thrives on strength, like Zola's. You've lost more than a partnership today." The words were a final blow, and the clan flinched, their silence a confession. Lena's hand rested on Zola's shoulder, her golden-threaded braids a promise of stories yet to weave. "You're our light, Zola," she said, her voice thick with love. "No one can dim that." Zola's eyes stung, her heart swelling with a warmth she hadn't known she'd lost. The braid in her hand lighter now, a symbol of endurance. Reese turned to Zola, his eyes fierce with love. "I failed you by being late," he said, his voice breaking. "But I'm here now, and we'll face this together." Zola leaned into him, her voice soft but unyielding. "You're here, Reese. That's enough." The clan watched, their silence a mirror to their shame, as Elise stood again, her voice stronger. "We need to change," she said, her eyes on Zola. "You've shown us how." Cora nodded, her remorse now a vow. "It's time, Araminta. We've been blind too long." Araminta slumped further, her hands covering her face, her voice a whisper. "You can't take my family." But the words were hollow, her reins shattered. The clan's eyes avoided her, their loyalty gone, replaced by a dawning respect for Zola. The dining hall's air lightened, the rain outside a gentle cadence, as if Charleston exhaled. Zola's braid gleamed in her hand, its golden threads a testament to her survival. She looked at Lena, then Reese, her heart aflame of purpose. The Vanguard's offer lingered, a gathering to bridge families, a chance to rewrite this house's story. Zola's gaze shifted to the doors, where the echo of footsteps had faded, but a new promise stirred, a future where her truth would burn brighter than any prejudice. Zola's declaration, "I'm Zola Vanguard, and I belong here," still echoed as she stood in the dining hall. Reese's hand warm in hers, the Vanguard's a steadfast shield beside her. The chandelier's light steadied, bathing her shorn hair in a golden glow, its remaining threads glinting like embers of her Gullah pride. Lena's offer of a new gathering lingered, a bridge to a future untainted by prejudice, while Araminta sat alone, her silhouette a fading shadow against the table, her silver scissors abandoned. The Devington clan's silence was a confession, their eyes no longer avoiding Zola, but seeking her, as if seeing her for the first time. The rain outside had hushed, Charleston's air clearing, as if the low country exhaled for her triumph. Zola stepped onto the veranda, the cool dusk wrapping around her like a balm. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, catching her shorn hair. Now a badge of survival, not shame. Reese stood beside her, his grip firm, his eyes fierce with love. "You're stronger than I ever knew," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "I should have been here sooner." Zola shook her head, squeezing his hand. "You're here now, Reese. That's enough." Her braid, clutched tightly, felt lighter, its golden threads a testament to her endurance. Lena joined them, her cornrows gleaming, a mirror to the legacy Zola was reclaiming. She held a single golden thread, its shimmer a promise. "We'll weave new stories, Zola," she said, her voice warm, "like we did under Atlanta's sun." Zola's throat tightened, a memory flickering, jasmine-scented nights, a porch swing, her mother's hands knotting her hair with love. "I'd like that." "Mom," she whispered, the word a tentative bridge to a past reborn. Lena's eyes glistened, her smile a beacon through 20 years of loss. Malcolm stepped forward, his broad frame a quiet strength. "You're our daughter always," he said, his voice steady. "No blade can cut that away." Zola nodded, her heart swelling, the braid in her hand a pulse of belonging. The veranda's boards creaked under their weight, a rhythm like the heartbeat of a new beginning. Elise followed, her steps hesitant, her eyes shadowed with remorse. "Zola, I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have stood up when Araminta. I was wrong." Her apology was raw, a crack in the Devington facade. Zola met her gaze, her voice kind but firm. "It's a start, Elise. That matters." Cora joined them, her wiry frame softened by guilt. "You've taught us what family means, child," she said, her eyes warm. "We've got work to do." Their words were seeds, fragile but hopeful, planted in the ruins of Araminta's prejudice. Malcolm's gaze swept the group, his voice a call to change. "We'll host a gathering in Atlanta," he said, his tone resolute. "A chance to build something better. For Zola, for all of us." Reese nodded, his jaw set. "My family needs this," he said, his hand tightening on Zola's. "I'll make sure we're there, Mr. Vanguard." The promise hung in the air, a vow to bridge the chasm Araminta's cruelty had carved. Elise's faint smile echoed its hope, Cora murmuring, "It's time." The sunset's glow deepened, as if blessing their resolve. Through the dining hall's windows, Araminta's silhouette remained, seated alone, her head bowed, the scissors a relic of her failed crusade. The clan's whispers, now of change, drifted out, leaving her in shadow. Zola felt no pity, only clarity. Araminta's attempt to erase her had forged something stronger. She turned to the horizon, her decision clear. She'd stay with Reese, their love a foundation, but she'd also reclaim her vanguard heritage, starting with Atlanta, where stories waited to be woven. "I'm ready to know who I am," she said, her voice a quiet vow, and Lena's tearful nod was a mother's blessing. Malcolm's eyes met hers, a father's pride. "You're already her, Zola," he said, his voice warm. "The rest is just catching up." The veranda swelled with the clan's tentative voices, some stepping out, their faces open, drawn to the light of change. Elise murmured to a cousin, "She's a vanguard, but she's ours too," her words a bridge forming. Zola stood between Reese and Lena, their hands clasped, Malcolm flanking them, the sunset bathing them in gold. Her shorn hair caught the breeze, a symbol of roots no blade could sever. The jasmine's scent curled around them, sweet and unyielding, and Zola's heart swelled, not with pain, but with possibility. The mansion behind them was no longer a cage, but a witness to her triumph, its walls echoing the truth she'd claimed. "We'll build something new," she said, her voice soft but certain, a vow to herself and her family. The stars pierced the twilight, and Zola knew with every golden thread in her hand that her roots would hold her, now and always. As Charleston's twilight fades, Zola stands unbroken, her gullah roots a beacon of resilience, her truth a flame that reshaped a dynasty. Her journey from violation to victory echoes in the heart, a testament to heritage no blade can sever. What moved you most in her saga? Did Zola's defiance stir your soul, or did the Devingtons' reckoning spark hope for change? Share your thoughts below. Your voice weaves the next chapter of this tale. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining Zola's fight, for standing with her through pain and triumph. Your presence lights the way. Return soon for more stories of courage and redemption, where roots run deep and truth burns bright. Until then, hold fast and let your stories shine. Call 911 now. Sophia Morales' voice sliced through the chaos of the Langley Mansion's dining room, her brown eyes blazing as she knelt beside Eleanor, guiding her through preterm labor. Her long black hair, neatly pinned in a bun at the nape of her neck, framed her steady hands. A Mexican maid turned savior in a world that scorned her. Moments ago, she was accused of spilling wine, a lie that burned. But now she held life itself in her grip. Her courage would unravel a family's darkest secrets, exposing a stolen legacy that shook Newport's elite. This is no ordinary tale. It's a firestorm of resilience, where a woman dismissed as nothing reshapes an empire. Sophia's journey will grip you, from betrayal to triumph, revealing a truth that echoes beyond the waves. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share where you're listening from, Newport, New York, or beyond. Her legacy awaits, burning bright. "Clumsy girl, you've ruined the evening." Charlotte Langley's voice sliced through the hum of the Newport Mansion's dining room, her blonde curls bouncing with venom. Sophia Morales froze, her hands gripping the silver tray, the crimson stain of spilled wine pooling on the marble floor like a fresh wound. The air crackled with the weight of accusation, the eyes of Newport's elite boring into her brown skin. Charlotte's elbow had clipped Sophia's arm, sending the glass crashing, but the blame landed squarely on the 28-year-old Mexican maid. "Do you know how much that crystal costs?" Charlotte snapped, her green eyes glinting with disdain. "More than you'll ever see in your Orchard Town life." Sophia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding so hard her temples throbbed. The guests' laughter stabbed like shards of glass, each chuckle a reminder of her place in their world. A servant, an outsider, a shadow in their gilded realm. Margaret Langley, the matriarch, leaned forward, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier's glow, her pearl earrings swaying like pendulums of judgment. "This is what happens when you hire charity cases," she said, her voice smooth as polished steel, cutting deeper than Charlotte's outburst. "Sophia, was it? You're a walking disaster." Sophia's pulse hammered, her knuckles whitening around the tray. She wanted to scream that it was Charlotte's fault, that the blonde heiress had bumped her in a careless twirl, but words caught in her throat like thorns. Her parents' faces flashed in her mind, her father's calloused hands picking fruit under a blazing California sun, her mother's fingers bleeding from late-night sewing to fund her nursing certificate. She'd come to Newport to support them, not to be mocked. Eleanor Langley, her mistress, sat silent, her lavender gown pristine, her green eyes fixed on her plate. James, Eleanor's husband, cleared his throat but said nothing, his blue gaze darting to his mother for approval. Their silence burned worse than the insults, a betrayal that twisted Sophia's gut. "You'd think a maid would know better," Charlotte continued, her voice a whip. "What's next, Sophia? Dropping the lobster bisque?" The guests snickered, their cufflinks flashing like tiny stars. Sophia's chest tightened, her breath shallow, but she forced her hands to move, grabbing a cloth to mop the wine. "I'm sorry, Miss Langley," she muttered, her voice low, steady, a shield against their scorn. But inside, fury roared, a fire fed by years of sidelong glances and whispered slights about her Mexican roots. As she knelt, scrubbing the stain, Margaret's voice cut again. "Hurry up, girl. You're embarrassing us." Sophia's fingers trembled, the cloth soaking red, her heart pounding with the urge to stand and walk out. She was done. Done with their condescension, done with this gilded cage. But before she could rise, a sharp cry shattered the room. Eleanor clutched her belly, her face ashen, her lavender gown darkening with fluid. "My water broke," she gasped, her voice raw with panic. The guests froze, glasses clinking in startled hands. Sophia's head snapped up, her nursing instincts kicking in like a switch. She dropped the cloth, the wine forgotten, and rushed to Eleanor's side, her hands steady despite the chaos. "Eleanor, look at me," she commanded, her voice a lifeline, calm and authoritative. "Breathe slow. I've got you." Her fingers found Eleanor's wrist, pulse racing but stable. "She's in preterm labor, 32 weeks, Sophia barked. "Call 911 now." A butler scrambled, his footsteps echoing. The guests' whispers rose. "Is she a doctor?" "No, just the maid." But Sophia shut them out, her focus laser sharp. She guided Eleanor to a cushioned bench, her hands moving with a nurse's precision, timing contractions. With two swift pushes, a tiny cry pierced the air, a girl fragile but alive. Sophia caught the infant, cleared her airway, and wrapped her in a clean cloth, placing her on Eleanor's chest. "She's okay," Sophia said, her voice soft but resonant. "You did it." The room stilled, the guests' eyes wide, their phones already glowing with the story. Sophia stood, her uniform stained, her heart pounding, but her resolve unbroken. Sophia Morales stood tall, her maid's uniform creased and stained with sweat, the newborn's cry still echoing in the Langley mansion's dining room. Eleanor Langley clutched her baby girl, tears streaming down her pale cheeks, her lavender gown a crumpled testament to the crisis Sophia had just mastered. The Newport elite stared, their champagne flutes forgotten, their whispers a mix of awe and disbelief. "She saved them," one murmured. "The maid?" Another hissed, their voices sharp as knives. But Sophia's heart pounded not with pride but with a raw, burning wound. The sting of Charlotte's false accusation, Margaret's icy scorn, and the deafening silence of Eleanor and James. Charlotte stepped forward, her blonde curls limp, her green eyes flickering with unease. "Sophia, that was incredible," she stammered, her voice thin, a fragile attempt at gratitude. Margaret, her silver hair still perfect, cleared her throat, her pearl earrings catching the chandelier's glow. "Yes, well done, Sophia," she said, her tone clipped, as if the words pained her. "You've surprised us all." The praise was a blade, coated in condescension, implying Sophia's heroism was an anomaly, not her essence. Sophia's jaw tightened, her teeth grinding until her temples ached. Her brown eyes locked onto Margaret's, then Charlotte's, unflinching. "I didn't save her for you," she said, her voice low, steady, cutting through the room like a scalpel. "I saved her because it's who I am." The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing the murmurs. Her hands, still warm from cradling the infant, clenched into fists. She thought of her parents, her father's sun-scorched hands picking fruit, her mother's needle-pricked fingers sewing late into the night. Their sacrifices had forged her, not the Langley's charity. Eleanor, still trembling, reached out. "Sophia, thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. James nodded, his blue eyes darting nervously, but he said nothing, his silence a fresh betrayal. Sophia's chest burned, the weight of the spilled wine, Charlotte's lie, and their earlier mockery pressing down. She turned, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her movements deliberate, a warrior's grace. The silver ring, etched with CL, weighed heavily in her pocket, unnoticed by the crowd, but a quiet anchor to her resolve. As she reached for her coat at the door, the guests' eyes followed, their phones glowing with the story of the maid who'd turned chaos into life. Sophia didn't look back. Her words hung in the air, a vow of her worth, a prophecy of her strength. "I'm done here," she said, her voice barely audible but heavy with finality. The door loomed before her, a threshold to freedom, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. Sophia Morales stood tall, her maid's uniform creased and stained with sweat, the newborn's cries still echoing in the Langley mansion's dining room. Eleanor Langley clutched her baby girl, tears streaming down her pale cheeks, her lavender gown a crumpled testament to the crisis Sophia had just mastered. The Newport elite stared, their champagne flutes forgotten, their whispers a mix of awe and disbelief. "She saved them," one murmured. "The maid?" another hissed, their voices sharp as knives. But Sophia's heart pounded not with pride but with a raw, burning wound. The sting of Charlotte's false accusation, Margaret's icy scorn, and the deafening silence of Eleanor and James. Charlotte stepped forward, her blonde curls limp, her green eyes flickering with unease. "Sophia, that was incredible," she stammered, her voice thin, a fragile attempt at gratitude. Margaret, her silver hair still perfect, cleared her throat, her pearl earrings catching the chandelier's glow. "Yes, well done, Sophia," she said, her tone clipped, as if the words pained her. "You've surprised us all." The praise was a blade coated in condescension, implying Sophia's heroism was an anomaly, not her essence. Sophia's jaw tightened, her teeth grinding until her temples ached. Her brown eyes locked onto Margaret's, then Charlotte's, unflinching. "I didn't save her for you," she said, her voice low, steady, cutting through the room like a scalpel. "I saved her because it's who I am." The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing the murmurs. Her hands, still warm from cradling the infant, clenched into fists. She thought of her parents, her father's sun-scorched hands picking fruit, her mother's needle-pricked fingers sewing late into the night. Their sacrifices had forged her, not the Langley's charity. Eleanor, still trembling, reached out. "Sophia, thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. James nodded, his blue eyes darting nervously, but he said nothing, his silence a fresh betrayal. Sophia's chest burned, the weight of the spilled wine, Charlotte's lie and their earlier mockery pressing down. She turned, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her movements deliberate, a warrior's grace. The silver ring, etched with CL, weighed heavily in her pocket, unnoticed by the crowd but a quiet anchor to her resolve. As she reached for her coat at the door, the guests' eyes followed, their phones glowing with the story of the maid who'd turned chaos into life. Sophia didn't look back. Her words hung in the air, a vow of her worth, a prophecy of her strength. "I'm done here," she said, her voice barely audible but heavy with finality. The door loomed before her, a threshold to freedom, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. The Langley mansion's dining room lay in stunned silence, the chandelier's light casting jagged shadows across the marble floor, still stained with wine. Sophia Morales had vanished through the heavy oak doors, her final words, "I'm done here," echoing like a judge's gavel. The newborn's cries had faded, replaced by the clatter of paramedics' boots as they wheeled Eleanor Langley and her infant daughter out into the Newport night. The guests, their tuxedos and gowns now creased, clutched their phones, the story of the maid who saved a life already spreading like wildfire. But the air was thick, charged with an unspoken shift. Margaret Langley sat rigid, her silver hair a crown of authority, now slightly askew, her pearl earrings glinting like cold stars. Her pale blue eyes darted to the wine-stained floor, where Sophia had knelt moments before, first to clean Charlotte's lie, then to deliver a miracle. A guest, a gray-haired banker in a tailored suit, leaned toward his wife, his voice low but sharp. "I saw it." Charlotte bumped her. The maid didn't spill that wine. His wife gasped, her diamond bracelet flashing as she covered her mouth. The words pierced Margaret's composure, her fingers tightening around her napkin until her knuckles whitened. "Nonsense," she snapped, her voice a whip, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, a crack in her fortress of certainty. Charlotte, her blonde curls drooping, overheard the banker's whisper. Her cheeks flushed, her green eyes darting to the floor, as if the truth could be scrubbed away like the wine. "It was an accident," she muttered, her voice barely audible, a weak defense that crumbled under the weight of her lie. She glanced at James, her brother-in-law, seeking rescue, but James stood frozen, his blue gaze locked on the door Sophia had exited, his jaw tight with guilt. Eleanor was gone, safe with her child, but her absence left a void, a mirror reflecting the family's failure to defend the woman who'd saved her. Margaret's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Her hand brushed the table, where a single cloth lay discarded, soaked red from Sophia's efforts to clean Charlotte's mess. Unseen by the guests, a glint of silver had caught Sophia's eye as she scrubbed. A small ring, etched with the letters CL, half hidden in the folds of the cloth. She'd slipped it into her pocket, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. The ring, unnoticed by the Langleys, was a spark, a mystery waiting to ignite. Margaret's eyes fell to Sophia's hand, where a glint of silver peeked from her pocket, the ring etched with CL, unnoticed by Sophia but catching Margaret's gaze. Her breath hitched, a shadow of recognition crossing her face, but she said nothing. The center's door creaked open, a gust of sea air slipping in, carrying the faint echo of waves crashing against Newport's cliffs. A whisper of secrets waiting to break free. "You think you can waltz in here and fix your guilt?" Sophia Morales' voice cut like a blade, her brown eyes blazing as she faced Margaret Langley in the crowded Newport Community Center. Her dark hair, pulled into a tight braid, swung as she turned back to a young mother, adjusting a bandage with steady hands. The air buzzed with the hum of Spanish and English, the scent of antiseptic mingling with the warmth of gratitude. Sophia's simple blouse clung to her frame, a far cry from the maid's uniform she'd worn days ago when she saved Eleanor Langley's baby. Now, in this haven of cracked walls and mismatched chairs, she was a force, her presence a beacon for the immigrant families who filled the room. Sophia's fingers moved with a nurse's precision, her focus unwavering as she checked a child's chart. Her mind racing with the memory of the Langley mansion, the spilled wine, Charlotte's lie, Margaret's scorn. Her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she pushed down the fury that still burned. She wasn't broken. She'd never been. Her parents' faces flashed, her father's hands rough from orchard work, her mother's fingers bleeding from late-night sewing to fund her nursing certificate. They'd built her, not the Langley's charity. This center, Hope Hub, was her proof, a place where she taught mothers to care for their babies, where she stitched wounds and soothed fears, her skills a quiet rebellion against the world that tried to shrink her. A teenage girl tugged at Sophia's sleeve, holding up a drawing of a stork. "For you, Miss Sophia," she said, her smile bright. Sophia knelt, her heart softening, her fingers brushing the paper. "Gracias, pequeña," she said, her voice warm, a shield against the ache of Margaret's presence. She pinned the drawing to a wall covered with thank you notes, a constellation of trust from a community that saw her, not as a maid, but as a healer. Margaret stood frozen, her silver hair catching the dim light, her pearl earrings glinting like accusations. Charlotte lingered behind, her scarf slipping, her green eyes darting to the floor, unable to meet Sophia's gaze. Sophia stood, her braids swaying, her eyes sweeping the room. A man in a worn jacket thanked her for helping his wife through a fever. A grandmother pressed her hand, whispering blessings in Spanish. This was her world, built on sweat and sacrifice, not the gilded cage of the Langleys. She'd come to Newport to support her family, deferring her dream of nursing, but here she was reclaiming it. Her hands, once forced to polish crystal, now held lives, each bandage a testament to her strength. She moved to a table, checking supplies, her fingers brushing the silver ring in her pocket, etched with CL, a mystery she hadn't yet unraveled, found amid the chaos of the spilled wine. Margaret cleared her throat, her voice trembling. "Sophia, we want to make this right." Sophia's hand paused, her pulse quickening, but she didn't turn. "Right?" she said, her voice low, sharp. "You don't get to decide what's right for me." The words landed like a slap, the room's hum fading as mothers glanced over, their eyes narrowing at the intruders. Sophia's chest tightened, the memory of Charlotte's lie, blaming her for the wine, still raw. She'd saved Eleanor's baby, not for their applause, but because her hands were built to heal, because her parents' sacrifices demanded it. Charlotte stepped forward, her voice shaky. You're more than we thought." Sophia's eyes snapped to her lips pressing into a thin line. "You never thought," she said, her tone a blade. "You saw my skin, my accent, and judged." The crowd's murmurs grew, a tide of support for Sophia, their healer. She turned back to her work, her hands steady, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. The ring in her pocket felt heavier, a secret waiting to unfold, its silver glint a spark in the dim light. The center's windows rattled, the Newport wind howling outside, carrying the salt of the sea and the promise of truce yet to surface. "Words don't erase lies," Sophia Morales snapped, her brown eyes flashing like sharpened steel as she faced Margaret Langley in the Hope Hub's crowded clinic. Her braids swung as she turned, handing a bottle of formula to a young mother, her hands steady despite the fury coiling in her chest. The community center buzzed with life, children laughing, mothers whispering thanks in Spanish, the air thick with antiseptic and trust. Sophia's simple blouse was a stark contrast to the maid's uniform she'd shed days ago when she'd saved Eleanor Langley's baby and walked out of their gilded world. Now Margaret stood before her silver hair catching the dim light, her pearl earrings glinting like relics of a world Sophia had rejected. Charlotte lingered behind, her scarf slipping, her green eyes darting to the floor, her blonde curls limp with shame. Margaret's lips parted, her voice trembling. "Sophia, we were cruel. I'm sorry for the wine, for everything." The apology was a crack in her armor, her hands twisting her purse until her knuckles whitened. Charlotte shuffled forward, her voice barely a whisper. "I lied about the spill. I was wrong." The words were a splinter, sharp but frail, unable to undo the wound of her accusation. Sophia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. She remembered the Langley dining room, the spilled wine, Charlotte's venom, Margaret's scorn, and the silence of Eleanor and James. Her fingers tightened around the formula bottle, her heart pounding with the memory of her parents. Her father's hands, scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers bleeding from late-night sewing. Their sacrifices had forged her strength, not the Langley's pity. "Sorry doesn't fix it," Sophia said, her voice low, cutting like a blade. "You judged me, my skin, my roots, before you knew me." The mothers around her nodded, their eyes narrowing at the intruders, a silent wall of support. Margaret's face flushed, her composure crumbling. "We want to make it right," she said, her voice cracking. "Please tell us how." Sophia's eyes narrowed, her pulse racing. She set the bottle down, her movements deliberate, and crossed her arms. "You want to make it right?" she said, her tone a challenge. "Support this place. Fund the clinic. Help these families you've never seen." The words were a gauntlet, thrown with the weight of her worth, a demand for action over empty words. Charlotte's lips parted, but Sophia cut her off. "Not just money, time. Work here. See the people you mocked." The room stilled, the mothers watching, their whispers fading. Margaret nodded, her hands trembling. "We will," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We'll do it." Charlotte's eyes widened, her scarf slipping further, but she nodded, her face pale. Sophia's chest tightened, her resolve a steel core, but a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Could they change? She pushed it aside, her focus returning to a child tugging at her sleeve, his smile a reminder of why she fought. As Sophia turned to grab a bandage, her hand brushed her pocket, and the silver ring, etched with CL, slipped out, clinking onto the table. The sound was faint, but Charlotte's gasp cut through the hum. "That ring," she stammered, her green eyes wide, her hand reaching out but stopping short. Where did you get it? Sophia frowned, her fingers closing around the ring, its weight heavy with mystery. Found it, she said, her voice sharp. When I was cleaning your mess. Charlotte's face paled, her breath hitching. It's Cecilia's. Our aunt. She was. Her voice trailed off, her eyes darting to Margaret, who froze, her pearl earrings still as if time had stopped. Sophia's heart skipped, her fingers tightening on the ring. Who's Cecilia? She asked, her voice low, probing. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flickering with something. Fear, shame, a secret buried deep. Nobody, she said too quickly, her voice a whip. But Sophia's gaze didn't waver, her instincts flaring. The mothers watched, sensing the shift, their whispers a rising tide. Sophia slipped the ring back into her pocket, her heart pounding with questions. Cecilia, whoever she was a thread she'd pull, a truth waiting to unravel. The clinic's door creaked, a gust of Newport salty air slipping in, carrying the faint crash of waves against the cliffs. A promise of secrets ready to break. Keep your hands off our secrets, girl, Victor's voice hissed like a snake, his weathered face twisting as he loomed over Sophia Morales in the dim corridor of the Langley mansion. The old butler's eyes, cold and gray, bored into her, his gnarled hands clutching a ring of keys that jangled like a warning. Sophia's pulse hammered, her fingers tightening around the silver ring etched with CL, the mysterious relic she'd found when cleaning Charlotte's spilled wine. She'd returned to the mansion to collect her final paycheck, but Victor's ambush, moments after her tense meeting with Margaret and Charlotte at the Hope Hub, felt like a trap. Her braids swung as she stepped back, her brown eyes narrowing, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. You don't belong here, Victor snapped, cutting her off before she could speak. That ring? It's none of your business. His voice was a blade, sharp with the weight of something hidden, his stooped frame blocking the hallway to the servants' quarters. Sophia's heart pounded, her mind flashing to Margaret's flinch when Charlotte recognized the ring as Cecilia Langley's. Who's Cecilia? Sophia demanded, her voice low, steady, a challenge that made Victor's lips curl. Nobody you need to know, he barked, his keys jangling as he stepped closer, his breath sour with menace. Give it to me, now. Sophia's fingers closed tighter around the ring, her knuckles whitening. She'd faced scorn before, Charlotte's lie about the wine, Margaret's icy insults. But Victor's hostility was different, a raw edge that hinted at a deeper wound. Her parents' faces surged in her memory, her father's hands scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She wasn't just a maid to be bullied. I found it, she said, her voice cutting like a knife. It's mine until I know why it matters. Victor's eyes flashed, his hand darting out to grab her wrist, but Sophia yanked back, her heels scraping the floor, her heart racing with defiance. You're digging into things that'll bury you, Victor growled, his voice a low rumble, his fingers twitching as if ready to strike. Sophia's chest burned, her breath shallow, but she held her ground, her eyes locked on his. She remembered the Hope Hub, the mothers who trusted her, the child's drawing pinned to the wall. She was more than their servant, more than their scapegoat. Threaten me again, she said, her tone sharp, and I'll scream this place down. Victor froze, his keys stilling, his face paling as footsteps echoed from the main hall, Margaret's voice calling for a servant. Sophia's hand slipped into her pocket, the ring's cold metal grounding her. Victor's gaze followed, his jaw tightening, a flicker of fear crossing his weathered features. You don't know what you're stirring up, he muttered, his voice barely audible, his eyes darting to the shadows of the corridor. Cecilia's gone. Let her stay gone. The name hung heavy, a spark igniting Sophia's curiosity. She'd heard Charlotte's gasp, seen Margaret's flinch. Victor's desperation only sharpened her resolve. She stepped past him, her heels clicking with purpose, her braids swaying like a banner of defiance. Margaret appeared at the corridor's end, her silver hair glinting, her pearl earrings swaying. Sophia? She called, her voice trembling with unease. Sophia didn't answer, her heart pounding with questions about Cecilia, about Victor's fear. She clutched the ring, its edges biting into her palm, a secret she'd unravel no matter the cost. Victor's eyes followed her, his keys jangling once more, a faint clink that echoed like a lock snapping shut. "You're chasing ghosts, Sophia, and they'll drag you down." Victor's hissed warning echoed in Sophia Morales' mind as she slammed the door of the Newport Community Library, her braids swinging, her brown eyes blazing with defiance. Her fingers clutched the silver ring etched with CL, its cold metal a burning question since Victor's ambush in the Langley Mansion's corridor. The old butler's threat, his desperate grab for the ring, had ignited a fire in her gut. A need to uncover who Cecilia Langley was and why her name made Margaret flinch and Charlotte pale. Sophia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she stormed into the library's dusty archive room, the air thick with the scent of old paper and secrets. Luis, the local teacher who'd caught her eye at the Hope Hub, followed close, his dark eyes sharp with concern, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice low, steady, a lifeline in the storm of her resolve. Sophia's lips pressed tight, her heart pounding with the memory of her parents, her father's hands, scarred from orchard work, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She wasn't just a maid, not anymore. She'd saved Eleanor's baby, faced down the Langley's scorn, and now she'd unravel their lies. "I'm sure," she said, her voice ablade. "Victor's hiding something. This ring proves it." She yanked open a drawer of yellowed files, her hands moving with a nurse's precision, her pulse racing as she scanned faded labels. The library was a maze of forgotten records, but Sophia's instincts, honed by years of navigating spaces that didn't want her, guided her to a box marked Langley Estate 1970s. Luis knelt beside her, his fingers brushing hers as he pulled out a ledger, his brow furrowing. "Cecilia Langley," he read, his voice catching. "Disinherited, 1975. Married a Mexican immigrant, erased from the family." Sophia's breath hitched, her fingers tightening on the ring. "Like me," she whispered, her heart thumping with a connection she couldn't shake. The ledger's pages crackled as she turned them, her eyes scanning handwritten notes. Cecilia had been vibrant, a painter, her work sold to fund the Langley empire, until she fell in love with Javier, a farm worker. Margaret, then a young matriarch, had branded her a disgrace, stripping her inheritance. Victor's name appeared, scrawled as a witness to legal documents, his loyalty to Margaret sealed in ink. Sophia's chest burned, her fingers trembling as she traced the words. "They stole her life," she said, her voice low, sharp. "Victor helped bury her." Luis nodded, his hand grazing her shoulder, a quiet anchor. "There's more," he said, pulling out a faded photo. Cecilia, smiling, her arm around a man with Sophia's brown skin, her dark hair. Sophia's heart skipped, her mind racing. The ring, Cecilia's ring, wasn't just a trinket, it was a key to a betrayal. She slammed the ledger shut, dust rising like a ghost. "We need to know what they took," she said, her voice a whip. Luis grabbed another file, his eyes narrowing. "Financial records," he said, flipping pages. "Cecilia's art sales, hundreds of thousands, diverted to the Langley Trust." Victor signed off. Sophia's jaw tightened, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. "They didn't just disown her," she said. "They robbed her." She stormed to a computer terminal, her fingers flying over the keys, searching public records. Luis stood close, his voice urgent. "If Victor's scared, he's protecting someone." Sophia nodded, her eyes locked on the screen. A newspaper clipping flashed up. 1976, Cecilia's disappearance after a public fight with Margaret. No trace, no follow-up. Sophia's pulse hammered, her mind flashing to Victor's gray eyes, his trembling hands. "He knows where she went," she said, her voice a low growl. "He's guarding their shame." They moved to a back shelf, pulling out a box of estate correspondence. Sophia's hands shook as she found a letter, sealed but brittle, addressed to "My son" in Cecilia's looping script. She tore it open, her breath shallow, her heart pounding with the weight of discovery. The letter spoke of pain, of Margaret's cruelty, of Victor forging papers to seize Cecilia's share of the family fortune. They left me with nothing, Cecilia wrote, her words a knife in Sophia's chest. But I'll fight for you. Sophia's fingers clenched the paper, her eyes burning with fury, her connection to Cecilia, a woman cast out like her, sealing her resolve. Luis grabbed her arm, his voice sharp. Sophia, we're close, but Victor's dangerous. He'll come for this. Sophia nodded, her hand slipping to her pocket, the ring's edges biting her palm. She'd faced Charlotte's lies, Margaret's scorn, and now Victor's threats. She wasn't backing down. Let him try, she said, her voice a blade, her braids swinging as she stood. The library's lights flickered, casting shadows over the files, the letter in her hand a burning torch. You can't undo what's buried, Sophia. Victor's threat rang in Sophia Morales' ears as she clutched Cecilia Langley's letter, her fingers trembling, the brittle paper crumpling under her grip. The Newport Library's archive room was a tomb of secrets, the air heavy with dust and betrayal. Her brown eyes burned, her braids swinging as she paced, the silver ring etched with CL, a searing weight in her pocket. Luis, her ally and the local teacher, stood close, his dark eyes scanning the letter, his jaw tight. The words of Cecilia, a woman disowned by the Langleys for loving a Mexican immigrant, cut like a blade, exposing a wound that mirrored Sophia's own. Her heart pounded, her teeth grinding as she read again. They left me with nothing. Margaret and Victor stole my future. Sophia's chest burned, her pulse hammering with fury. The letter, found in a forgotten box, revealed the truth. Margaret Langley, with Victor's help, had forged documents to seize Cecilia's inheritance. Her art sales funneled into the family's empire. Cecilia's love for Javier, a farm worker, had been her crime, her banishment a calculated erasure. Sophia's mind flashed to her own parents, her father's hands, scarred from orchards, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. They didn't just disown her, Sophia said, her voice a low growl, sharp as a knife. They robbed her life. Luis nodded, his hand brushing her arm, his voice steady. And Victor's still guarding their lie. She slammed the letter onto the table, dust rising like a ghost. Her eyes locked on a faded signature. Victor's, scrawled on a legal note attached to Cecilia's disinheritance papers. He knew, Sophia said, her voice cutting through the silence. He helped Margaret bury her. Her fingers tightened on the ring, its edges biting her palm, a spark of Cecilia's defiance. Luis grabbed a file, his hands swift, pulling out a bank record. Look, he said, his voice urgent. 1976, a transfer, hundreds of thousands from Cecilia's art to the Langley Trust. Victor's name is all over it. Sophia's breath caught, her heart thumping with the weight of the betrayal. They built their wealth on her pain, she said, her tone a blade, her eyes blazing. She stormed to a shelf, yanking out another box, her hands moving with a nurse's precision. A photograph slipped out, Cecilia, radiant, standing with Javier and a baby boy, their smiles defiant. Sophia's chest tightened, her mind racing. Her son, she whispered, her voice cracking. They took everything from him, too. The letter's final words burned in her mind. I'll fight for you. Cecilia had vanished, but her son was out there, a living thread of the Langleys' shame. Sophia's resolve hardened, her heart pounding with a vow to right this wrong, to give Cecilia's story the justice her own family deserved. Luis grabbed her shoulder, his voice sharp. Victor's not done. If he knows you have this, he'll come for you. Sophia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. She remembered Victor's gray eyes, his trembling hands, his hissed threats in the mansion's corridor. Let him, she said, her voice a whip. I'm not afraid. Her fingers closed around the letter, folding it with care, a weapon against the Langleys' lies. She slipped it into her pocket with the ring, her heart a drumbeat of defiance, her mind already mapping the next step. Finding Cecilia's son, exposing the truth. The library's door creaked, a shadow flickering in the hallway, the faint clink of keys echoing like a warning. Victor's presence loomed, his secrets unraveling. The Newport night outside whispering of a reckoning ready to strike. You'll regret digging into our dirt, girl. Victor's growl sliced through the musty air of the Langley mansion's storage room, his gray eyes glinting like knives as he lunged at Sophia Morales. Her braid whipped as she dodged, her heart slamming against her ribs, her fingers clutching Cecilia Langley's letter and the silver ring etched with CL. The old butler's keys jangled in his fist, his weathered face twisted with rage, his stooped frame blocking the only exit. Sophia had slipped into the mansion at dawn, driven by the truth she'd uncovered in the library. Margaret and Victor's theft of Cecilia's inheritance, a betrayal that mirrored her own scars. Now Victor's ambush trapped her, his voice a venomous hiss. "Give me that letter. Now!" Sophia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. "Never!" she spat, her voice a blade, her brown eyes blazing. Her mind flashed to her parents, her father's hands scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She'd saved Eleanor's baby, faced Charlotte's lies, and now she'd fight for Cecilia's justice. Victor stepped closer, his keys swinging like a weapon, cutting off her reply. "You're nothing here," he snarled. "A maid meddling in things she can't understand." His hand shot out, grabbing for the letter, but Sophia twisted away, her heels scraping the dusty floor, her pulse a war drum. The storage room was a maze of crates and shadows, the air thick with the scent of mold and secrets. Sophia's back hit a shelf, papers fluttering like ghosts. "I understand enough," she said, her voice sharp, her hand shielding the letter. "You and Margaret stole Cecilia's life." Victor's face darkened, his lips curling. "She was a disgrace," he barked, his keys jangling as he lunged again, knocking a box to the floor, its contents spilling. Old photos, deeds, proof of Cecilia's erased legacy. Sophia's heart raced, her fingers tightening on the letter, its words burning in her mind. "They left me with nothing." Victor's hand clamped her wrist, his grip iron, his breath sour. "You'll disappear like she did," he hissed, yanking her toward a heavy door. Sophia's free hand shot out, grabbing a crate's edge, her nails digging into wood, her body straining. "Let go!" she shouted, her voice echoing, her braids swinging as she kicked his shin. Victor grunted, his grip loosening, but he slammed the door shut, the lock clicking like a gunshot. Sophia's chest heaved, her breath shallow, her mind racing. She was trapped, the letter and ring her only weapons, her resolve a steel core forged by years of scorn. She scanned the room, her eyes catching a rusty crowbar leaning against a crate. Her fingers closed around it, her knuckles whitening, her heart pounding with defiance. "You can't silence me," she said, her voice low, cutting. Victor laughed, a cold, jagged sound, his keys jangling as he stepped closer. "You're alone, girl," he said, his voice a whip. "Nobody's coming." But Sophia's lips pressed tight, her eyes narrowing. She remembered the Hope Hub, the mothers who trusted her, and the child's stork drawing pinned to the wall. She wasn't alone. She carried her parents' strength, Cecilia's truth. Sophia swung the crowbar, not to strike, but to smash a crate, papers spilling like a flood. Victor flinched, his eyes widening, his keys dropping with a clatter. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice cracking. But Sophia kept moving, her hands tearing through documents, finding a sealed envelope marked Cecilia Langley Private. Her heart skipped, her fingers ripping it open, revealing a contract, proof of Margaret's forgery, Victor's signature scrawled at the bottom. "This ends now," Sophia said, her voice a blade, her braids swaying as she faced him, the crowbar still in hand. Victor's face paled, his hands trembling, his eyes darting to the door. Footsteps echoed outside. Luis, her ally, banging on the lock, his voice sharp. "Sophia, hold on!" Sophia's pulse surged, her resolve unyielding, the letter and contract clutched tight. Victor's keys lay scattered, his power crumbling, the truth a fire she'd carry into the light. "You'll never leave this room with that!" Victor's voice was a guttural snarl, his gray eyes wild as he lunged for the contract in Sophia Morales' hands. The Langley Mansion's storage room was a battlefield of shadows, papers strewn across the dusty floor like fallen soldiers. Sophia's braid whipped as she dodged, her heart slamming against her ribs, her fingers clutching the damning document. Proof of Margaret Langley and Victor's theft of Cecilia Langley's inheritance. The silver ring etched with CL burned in her pocket, a spark of truth she'd carried since the night of Charlotte's lie about the spilled wine. Her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed, her brown eyes blazing with defiance. "Back off!" Sophia snapped, her voice a blade, her free hand gripping the rusty crowbar she'd used to smash open crates. Victor's keys lay scattered, his weathered face twisted with panic, his stooped frame trembling as he blocked the locked door. "You're a maid, nothing more," he barked, cutting her off, his voice a whip. "You think you can ruin us?" Sophia's chest burned, her breath sharp, her mind flashing to her parents. Her father's hands, scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers, bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She'd saved Eleanor's baby, faced Charlotte's lies, and now she'd fight for Cecilia's justice. She ducked behind a shelf, her heels scraping the floor, her hands tearing through a crate's contents. Ledgers, letters, a leather-bound journal marked Cecilia Langley. Her pulse raced, her fingers ripping it open, pages crackling like gunfire. The journal's words hit like a punch. "Margaret ordered Victor to forge my signature. They took my art, my money, my son's future." Sophia's heart thumped, her eyes scanning Cecilia's desperate script, detailing how Victor had locked her paintings in the mansion's vault, how Margaret had erased her from the family to protect their empire. "They stole her life," Sophia whispered, her voice a low growl, her hands trembling with fury. Victor lunged again, his arm grazing her shoulder, but Sophia swung the crowbar, slamming it against a crate, wood splintering. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice echoing, her braids swinging like a banner of defiance. Victor stumbled, his face paling, his keys forgotten. The door rattled. Luis, her ally, pounding from the other side, his voice sharp. "Sophia, I'm here!" Sophia's heart surged, her resolve a steel core. She dove for another box, her fingers clawing through papers, finding a sealed deed. Proof that Cecilia's art sales, worth millions, had been funneled into the Langley Trust under Victor's forged signatures. "You're done, Victor," Sophia said, her voice cutting like a knife, her eyes locked on his. "This proves everything." Victor's lips curled, his voice a hiss. "You'll pay for this, girl." He grabbed a heavy ledger, hurling it at her, but Sophia ducked, the book crashing into a shelf, papers raining down. She clutched the deed and journal, her knuckles whitening, her mind racing. She needed one more piece, something undeniable. Her eyes caught a glint in the debris, a locked metal box, half hidden under a crate, its latch engraved with Langley Trust. Sophia dropped to her knees, her crowbar prying the lock, metal groaning under her force. Victor rushed forward, his hands clawing for the box, but a shout stopped him cold. "Victor, stop!" Charlotte Langley burst through the door, Luis behind her, his dark eyes blazing, a crowbar of his own in hand. Charlotte's blonde curls were disheveled, her green eyes wide with shock, her scarf gone. "I heard everything," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Sophia's right. You betrayed Cecilia." Victor froze, his face ashen, his keys useless on the floor. Sophia's hands shook as she opened the box, revealing a stack of contracts, each bearing Cecilia's true signature, proving her art was hers, not the family's. A letter from Cecilia's son, Miguel, was tucked inside, pleading for his mother's legacy. Sophia's chest tightened, her heart pounding with the weight of Cecilia's pain, so like her own, cast out, erased, yet fighting. "This is it," she said, her voice a whip, her braids swaying as she stood, the documents clutched tight. Charlotte's hands trembled, her face pale. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice cracking. Luis grabbed Sophia's arm, his voice urgent. "We've got enough. Let's go." Sophia nodded, her eyes never leaving Victor's. "Your lies end here," she said, her tone sharp, her heart a drumbeat of justice. She stepped past him, the deed and journal her weapons, Luis and Charlotte at her side. Victor's shoulders slumped, his eyes darting to the shadows, his power crumbling. The storage room's air grew heavy, the faint crash of Newport's waves outside a rhythm of truth ready to break free. "You think you can tear us down, Maid?" Victor's snarl cut through the roar of the Newport Community Gala, his gray eyes flashing as he shoved through the crowd, his weathered face twisted with fury. Sophia Morales stood center stage, her braids swinging, her brown eyes blazing like torches, her hands clutching Cecilia Langley's journal and the damning contracts. The gala's polished guests, Newport's elite in tuxedos and gowns, froze, their champagne flutes trembling, their murmurs silenced by the fire in Sophia's voice. She'd stormed the event, uninvited, with Luis and Charlotte at her side, the documents from the mansion's storage room her weapons, the silver ring etched with CL burned in her pocket, a spark of Cecilia's stolen legacy. You stole her life. Sophia's voice sliced like a blade, her finger pointing at Victor, then Margaret Langley, who stood rigid at the front, her silver hair glinting, her pearl earrings swaying like pendulums of guilt. Cecilia Langley was your sister, Margaret. You and Victor forged her out, took her art, her money, her son. The crowd gasped, their phones glowing, capturing every word. Sophia's heart pounded, her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. Her mind flashed to her parents, her father's hands, scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She'd saved Eleanor's baby, faced Charlotte's lies, and now she'd exposed the Langley's shame. Victor lunged forward, his keys jangling in his fist, his voice a hiss. Lies! You're nothing but a meddling servant. He grabbed for the journal, but Sophia stepped back, her braid whipping, her eyes locked on his. Read it, she shouted, thrusting the journal high. Its pages opened to Cecilia's words. They left me with nothing. You forged her signature, Victor. You helped Margaret steal millions. The crowd's whispers surged, a tide of shock. Margaret's face paled, her hands trembling, her voice cracking. Sophia, stop, she pleaded, but Sophia cut her off, her voice a whip. You erased her, Margaret, for your empire. Charlotte, her blonde curls loose, her green eyes wide, stepped forward, her voice shaking. It's true, she said, her words a knife through the silence. I saw the papers. Cecilia was family. We betrayed her. The crowd erupted, their murmurs a storm, their phones flashing. Margaret's lips parted, her eyes darting to Victor, who froze, his keys slipping from his hand, clattering to the floor. You don't understand, he stammered, his voice breaking. She was a disgrace. Sophia's chest burned, her fingers tightening on the contracts. Their ink proof of Cecilia's stolen art sales, her disinheritance, her son's lost future. Disgrace, Sophia snapped, her voice cutting like steel. She loved someone you didn't approve of, a Mexican like me. That's your crime. She slammed the contracts onto a table, their pages spilling, the crowd leaning in, their gasps a chorus. Luis at her side grabbed her arm, his dark eyes sharp. Show them, he said, his voice steady. Sophia held up Cecilia's letter to her son, Miguel, her voice booming. This is Cecilia's truth. You took everything from her, and I'm giving it back. The crowd roared, their applause a wave, their respect for Sophia a palpable force. Margaret stumbled forward, her hands clutching her chest, her pearl earrings still. I didn't mean, she whispered, her voice a broken thread. Sophia's eyes locked on hers, unflinching. You meant every choice, she said, her tone a blade. You and Victor chose greed over family. Victor's shoulders slumped, his face ashen, his eyes darting to the exits. But the crowd closed in, their phones recording, their whispers a judgment. Charlotte's hands shook, her voice soft. We were wrong, Sophia. All of us. Sophia's heart pounded, her resolve a steel core, her parents' sacrifices fueling her fire. The gala's lights flickered, casting shadows over the documents. The truth laid bare. Sophia stood tall, her braid a banner of defiance, the ring in her pocket a spark of justice. The crowd's cheers grew louder, the Newport night outside humming with the crash of waves, a rhythm of reckoning ready to reshape the Langley legacy. You betrayed us all, Victor. Margaret Langley's voice cracked like a whip, her silver hair trembling as she faced the old butler in the Langley mansion's grand hall. Victor stood slumped, his gray eyes hollow, his jangling keys silent on the floor, his weathered face drained of fight. Sophia Morales stood steps away, her braid tight, her brown eyes blazing, her hands still clutching Cecilia Langley's journal and contracts, proof of the family's theft of Cecilia's inheritance. The Newport Gala's exposure had shattered Victor's defenses, the crowd's cheers still ringing in Sophia's ears, their phones flashing with the truth she'd laid bare. Her heart pounded, her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she stared down the man who'd tried to silence her. "You forged her out," Sophia said, her voice a blade, cutting through the hall's heavy air. "You and Margaret stole Cecilia's life." Victor's lips parted, his voice a rasp. "I did my duty," he muttered, but his hands shook, his keys useless. Margaret stepped forward, her pearl earrings swaying, her face ashen. "Enough," she snapped, her voice sharp but breaking. "You're done, Victor." She turned to Sophia, her eyes flickering with shame. "He's gone. Fired. The police will handle the rest." Victor's shoulders sagged, his gaze dropping to the floor, his power crumbling like dust. Sophia's chest burned, her mind flashing to her parents, her father's hands, scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She'd saved Eleanor's baby, faced Charlotte's lies, and now she'd toppled Victor's reign. The contracts detailing Cecilia's stolen art sales were handed to a lawyer in the crowd, a woman with steady eyes who nodded. "This is enough for charges," she said, her voice firm. "Fraud, theft." Sophia's pulse surged, her fingers tightening on the journal. Cecilia's words, "They left me with nothing," fueling her fire. Margaret's hands trembled, her voice low. "We'll return what's hers," she said, her eyes meeting Sophia's, raw with guilt. "The money, the art, it goes to Cecilia's son." Sophia's lips pressed tight, her heart thumping with the weight of justice. She wasn't just fighting for Cecilia, she was fighting for herself, for every immigrant dismissed as less. The lawyer tucked the documents away, her pen scratching notes, the hall's silence a testament to Victor's fall. Victor shuffled toward the door, escorted by security, his keys left behind, a faint clink echoing like a final confession. Sophia stood tall, her braid a banner of defiance, the silver ring in her pocket a spark of Cecilia's reclaimed legacy. The hall's air grew lighter, the faint crash of Newport's waves outside a rhythm of justice sealed, a promise of a new chapter ready to unfold. "You can't buy back what you broke, Margaret." Sophia Morales' voice cut like a blade, her brown eyes blazing as she faced Margaret Langley in the Newport Community Center's newly renovated clinic. Her braids swung, her white blouse crisp, a far cry from the maid's uniform she'd worn when she saved Eleanor's baby and exposed the Langley's theft of Cecilia's inheritance. The Hope Hub buzzed with life, mothers cradling babies, nurses bustling, Spanish and English mingling in a chorus of trust. Sophia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she recalled Victor's fall, the gala where she'd laid bare the family's shame with Cecilia's journal and contracts. Now Margaret stood before her silver hair loose, her pearl earrings gone, her hands trembling with a check for millions. "We want to fix this," Margaret said, her voice shaking, her eyes raw with guilt. "This money, it's Cecilia's, for your clinic." Sophia's heart pounded, her fingers tightening on a patient chart, her mind flashing to her parents, her father's hands, scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She'd fought for Cecilia's justice, faced Charlotte's lies, and now Margaret thought a check could erase the past. "Money doesn't heal lies," Sophia snapped, her voice a whip. "You erased Cecilia. You scorned me." Charlotte stepped forward, her blonde curls tied back, her green eyes flickering with unease. She wore a volunteer apron, her hands stained from sorting supplies. "I'm here, Sophia," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm working, learning." Sophia's lips pressed tight, her pulse racing. Charlotte had joined the Hope Hub, teaching health classes to immigrant mothers, her once sharp tongue softened by shame. Eleanor, pushing a stroller with her daughter, named Sophia, nodded, her lavender scarf slipping, her voice cracking. "We're funding a network," she said, "clinics across Rhode Island, for families like yours." Sophia's chest tightened, her breath sharp, the weight of their offer heavy but suspect. Margaret shoved the check forward, her hands shaking. It's not just money, she said, her voice breaking. We're giving back Cecilia's art, her paintings, her legacy, to her son. Sophia's heart skipped, her eyes narrowing. She remembered Cecilia's letter. I'll fight for you, and the pain of a woman cast out for loving an immigrant. Like her. Prove it, Sophia said, her tone a blade, her braids swaying as she crossed her arms. Build the clinics. Work here. See these people. The mothers around her nodded, their eyes fierce, a wall of support for their healer. Margaret's face flushed, her hands clutching the check. We will, she said, her voice firm, a vow carved from guilt. Charlotte grabbed a box of bandages, her fingers fumbling but determined, her eyes meeting Sophia's. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice raw. I'll keep showing up. Eleanor knelt beside her daughter, little Sophia cooing, her tiny hand gripping a stork drawing, a gift from a patient. You saved her, Eleanor said, her eyes wet. You're why we're changing. Sophia's heart thumped, her resolve a steel core, but a flicker of hope stirred. Could they mean it? James Langley entered, his blue eyes steady, his suit replaced by a work shirt. Our company's hiring immigrants, he said, his voice low. Fair wages, benefits. It's a start. Sophia's breath caught, her mind racing. The Langley's empire, built on Cecilia's stolen wealth, was shifting, their actions a ripple from Sophia's fire. She nodded, her lips tight, her eyes scanning the clinic. New equipment, more staff, mothers smiling. The check, Cecilia's millions, would fund clinics statewide, a network for the forgotten, a legacy born from Sophia's fight. Sophia moved to a patient, checking a chart, her hands steady, her heart pounding with purpose. She'd turned scorn into justice, lies into truth. The mothers watched, their gratitude a chorus, their babies a testament to her work. Charlotte handed her a bandage, their fingers brushing, a silent pact. Margaret joined, stacking supplies, her hands trembling but earnest. Eleanor pushed the stroller, her daughter's giggle a spark of hope. Sophia's fingers grazed the silver ring in her pocket, Cecilia's legacy now fueling her own. The clinic's air hummed with life, the faint crash of Newport's waves outside a rhythm of renewal, a promise of a future built on redemption and trust. You can't silence a legacy, Margaret, Sophia Morales' voice rang out, sharp as a blade, as she stood on Newport's waterfront, her braid whipping in the salty breeze, her brown eyes blazing with triumph. The Hope Hub's new flagship clinic loomed behind her, its glass doors etched with Morales Health Network, a beacon for the forgotten, immigrant mothers, workers, dreamers like her. Her white blouse fluttered, a far cry from the maid's uniform she'd worn when she saved Eleanor Langley's baby and exposed the family's theft of Cecilia Langley's inheritance. Now, a year later, the Langley's empire was shifting, their guilt turned into action, their millions funding clinics across Rhode Island. Sophia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she faced Margaret, whose silver hair hung loose, her pearl earrings gone, her face raw with humility. You changed everything, Margaret said, her voice trembling, her hands clutching a folder of Cecilia's restored paintings, their vibrant colors a testament to a woman reborn. We're giving it all back, her art, her legacy, to her son. Sophia's heart pounded, her mind flashing to her parents, her father's hands scarred from orchard labor, her mother's fingers bleeding from sewing to fund her nursing dreams. She'd faced Charlotte's lies, Victor's threats, and now stood as a healer, a warrior. It's not about giving back, Sophia snapped, her voice a whip. It's about doing right. Margaret nodded, her eyes wet, her hands shaking as she handed the folder to a man in his 40s. Miguel, Cecilia's son, his dark eyes mirroring Sophia's own. Miguel stepped forward, his hands gripping the folder, his voice rough. You gave my mother her name again, he said, his eyes locking on Sophia's. Thank you. A letter from Cecilia tucked among the paintings slipped out, its words echoing in Sophia's mind. I'll fight for you. Her chest tightened, her pulse racing with the weight of a woman's pain she'd carried, a pain like her own. Cast out, erased, yet defiant. She fought for you, Sophia said, her voice soft but firm. her braids swaying as she handed him the silver ring etched with CL. Miguel's fingers closed around it, his breath hitching, his eyes glistening with gratitude. Charlotte approached, her blonde curls tied back, her volunteer apron stained from hours at the clinic. "I'm staying," she said, her voice steady, her green eyes meeting Sophia's. "Teaching, helping." Her hands clutched a stack of health pamphlets, her once sharp tongue softened by months of work beside immigrant mothers. Eleanor pushed a stroller, her daughter, little Sophia, giggling, clutching a stork drawing, a gift from a patient. "Your family now," Eleanor said, her voice cracking, her lavender scarf slipping. James stood beside her, his blue eyes steady, his work shirt creased from overseeing new hires. Immigrants like Sophia's parents, given fair wages. "We're rewriting our legacy," he said, his voice low, a vow carved from guilt. Sophia's heart thumped, her eyes sweeping the crowd. Mothers from the Hope Hub, nurses she'd trained, Luis, her partner, his dark eyes warm with pride. He grabbed her hand, his fingers strong, his voice a whisper. "You built this, Sophia." She nodded, her lips pressing tight, her heart swelling with the weight of her journey. She'd turned scorn into justice, lies into truth, her parents' sacrifices into a network of clinics serving thousands. The mothers cheered, their voices a chorus of Spanish and English, their babies a testament to her fight. A young girl ran up, her pigtails bouncing, thrusting a new drawing, a heart with Sophia's name, into her hands. Sophia knelt, her chest aching, her fingers brushing the paper. "Gracias, pequeña," she said, her voice warm, a shield against the scars of the past. Margaret stepped closer, her hands empty now, her face stripped of pride. "We're funding scholarships," she said, her voice soft. "For kids like you were." Sophia's breath caught, her mind flashing to her mother's late nights, her father's dawn shifts. She didn't forgive, not fully, but she nodded, her eyes sharp. "Make it real," she said, her tone a blade. "Actions, not promises." Margaret's lips trembled, her nod firm, a silent pact. Charlotte handed Sophia a pamphlet, their fingers brushing, a bridge built from shame to redemption. Eleanor's daughter giggled, her tiny hand waving, a spark of hope. Louis squeezed Sophia's hand, his voice steady. "We're just starting," he said, his eyes locked on hers, a love rooted in respect, not conquest. Sophia's heart opened, her smile radiant, her braid catching the waterfront's glow. She didn't need the Langleys to complete her. She was whole, a daughter of immigrants, a healer of lives. But their actions, their change, were a gift she'd accept, a step toward a world where worth wasn't measured by skin or status. The crowd grew, vendors from the immigrant district joining, their cheers a tide of unity. Sophia turned to the clinic, its glass doors gleaming, a monument to her fight. She pinned the girl's drawing to a wall already covered with thank yous, a constellation of gratitude. Miguel stood beside her, his fingers clutching Cecilia's ring, his voice low. "Mom would have loved you," he said, his eyes wet. Sophia's chest swelled, her heart pounding with purpose, her parents' faces clear in her mind. She'd fought for Cecilia, for herself, for every dreamer dismissed as less. The lesson burned bright. Resilience and compassion shatter prejudice, building a world where justice thrives. Sophia Morales' journey proves that resilience and compassion can shatter prejudice, forging a legacy of justice that outshines scorn. From a scorned maid to a beacon of hope, she turned betrayal into triumph, giving voice to the silenced. Her story burns bright, a call to stand tall against injustice. Share your thoughts below. What moved you most? Have you faced a moment where your strength changed everything? Drop your story in the comments and tell us where you're tuning in from. Thank you for joining us. Your support lights our path. Subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll see you in the next